Let your mind drift back, not just years or centuries, but millennia. We're going to a place so far in the past that the very stars in the night sky would be subtly different. We are journeying to deep time. 50,000 years before the present, to a continent that has been adrift, alone, for an eternity. This is Australia. But it is not the Australia of postcards and travel guides. There are no sun-bleached surfers, no bustling cities clinging to the coastlines. There are no sheep stations, no highways stretching across the outback. The familiar shapes of this land are there. The curve of a bay, the rise of a distant mountain range. But they are draped in a fabric of alien life. The sun does not simply rise here. It bleeds across the horizon. A deep, bruised crimson that stains the high, thin clouds and sets the world on fire. The light that follows is sharp and unforgiving. It reveals a landscape painted in shades of ochre, rust, and pale, ghostly green. Imagine yourself standing on a low ridge as this day begins. The ground beneath your feet is a compact red earth, cracked by the heat of a sun that has not yet fully risen. There is no soft grass here. Instead, you see clumps of wiry, silver-tussoced spinifex, sharp enough to cut skin, and low, hardy shrubs with waxy leaves that hoard every drop of moisture. The trees are strange. Towering eucalyptus, yes, but they seem larger, more primeval. Their bark hangs in long, tattered strips like shed skin. Ghost gums stand stark and white against the red earth, their branches twisted into skeletal shapes by the wind and the struggle for life. And among them are other, stranger forms. Giant cycads that have stood in place for centuries. Their tough, spiky fronds arranged in a perfect geometric circle. They're living fossils, relics from a time when dinosaurs still walked the earth, and they watched the dawn with an ancient vegetative indifference. The silence is the first thing you notice, or rather, the quality of the silence. It is not an absence of sound. It is a presence, a heavy, ringing quiet that presses in on you. It is the sound of a world without machines, without roads, without the constant hum of human civilization. But the silence is not empty. Listen closer. There is the whisper of the wind through the casuarina trees, a sound like a distant, sighing sea. There's the dry rustle of a lizard skittering over sun-baked rock. And then there are other sounds, calls that have no name in any language you know. From a patch of dense woodland in the valley below comes a low, resonant boom. It's a deep, guttural note that seems to vibrate in your chest, the call of something immense. It is not the moo of a cow or the roar of a lion. It is the sound of a creature that has no modern equivalent. A shriek, high and sharp, cuts through the air from the west. A bird, perhaps, but it has a serrated metallic edge to it, like a blade being drawn across stone. You scan the sky, but see nothing. The world feels watchful. The shadows cast by the rising sun are long and deep, and they seem to harbor secrets. You get the sense that you are not alone, that you are being observed by eyes that have seen this dawn 1,000 times before. a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision. Was it just the wind stirring a bush, or something more? A track in the dust catches your eye. It is a deep three-toed print, larger than your outstretched hand. Whatever made it was heavy, and it was walking, not hopping. This is a land of profound emptiness and staggering life all at once. Vast open plains stretch to a horizon that shimmers with heat, giving way to forests of trees that have never been felled. Rivers carve their way through the land, but they are not the gentle, meandering streams of a softer continent. They can be dry, sandy beds for years, only to become raging brown torrents after a sudden storm, rearranging the landscape in a single violent afternoon. This is a world of megafauna. Giants. This is the truth of prehistoric Australia. It wasn't a continent of just kangaroos and koalas. It was a land of monsters. Creatures that would dwarf their modern relatives, born of millions of years of isolation and a unique evolutionary arms race. In the valley below, a herd of creatures, each the size of a rhinoceros, moves slowly through the trees. They are not rhinos. They have thick, shaggy fur and the gentle, wombat-like faces of marsupials. These are Diprotodon, the largest marsupials that ever lived. A family group, browsing on leaves, their immense weight making the ground tremble with each step. They are peaceful, but a startled one could crush you without a second thought. This land is a predator. The sun itself is a hunter, ready to drain the life from anything that cannot find shade. The earth can open up in deep, hidden fissures. The waterholes, the very sources of life, are also the most dangerous places on the continent, drawing in both the thirsty and those who prey upon them. As you stand on that ridge, a silent witness to a forgotten dawn, you realize a profound and chilling truth. In this world, you are not the apex predator. You are not the master of this domain. You are small, and soft, and slow.
A continent of isolation. To understand the terror and the wonder of prehistoric Australia, we must first understand the reason for its strangeness. It is a story not of a single event, but of a slow, geological parting of ways, a story of isolation. Let the timeline in your mind stretch even further back, beyond the 50,000 years we first visited. We must go back millions of years, to a time when the world's continents were arranged differently. Australia was not always an island. It was once the southern tip of a great supercontinent called Gondwana, connected to Antarctica, South America, and Africa. It was a world of shared flora and fauna, a global community of life. But the Earth is a restless planet. The tectonic plates, moving at the speed a fingernail grows, began to shift. It is a process so slow, so inexorable, that it is almost impossible for a human mind to grasp. Imagine a ship casting off its mooring lines, not in a single moment, but over the course of 1,000,000 years. That was Australia. Around 50 million years ago, it broke away from Antarctica and began its long, solitary drift northward. It was now an ark, a continental lifeboat sailing across the vast, empty expanse of the ocean, carrying with it a unique cargo of plants and animals. As it drifted, the world outside changed. In Africa and Asia, the great stage of evolution was playing out a drama of placental mammals. This was the group that would eventually give rise to cats, dogs, bears, horses, elephants, and primates, including ourselves. It was a world of intense competition. Predators and prey were locked in a constant arms race, leading to the development of fleet-footed gazelles, powerful saber-toothed cats, and intelligent pack hunters. But on the Australian arc, the story was different. The dominant mammals were not placental. They were marsupials, creatures that give birth to tiny, underdeveloped young, which then complete their development in a pouch. And a few even more ancient, stranger creatures, the monotremes, the egg-laying mammals like the platypus and echidna. This isolation was the crucible in which Australia's unique horrors were forged. For millions of years, life on this continent evolved without any contact with the great placental dynasties of the north. It was a separate experiment running in parallel, and like any isolated system, it produced results that were both brilliant and bizarre. The evolutionary pressures here were different. The continent itself was changing. As it drifted north, it moved into warmer, drier latitudes. The lush rainforests that once covered much of the land began to retreat, replaced by vast stretches of sclerophyll forest, dominated by tough, hardy plants like eucalyptus and acacia, and arid desert. Life had to adapt or die. The herbivores, the plant eaters, evolved to handle this new, tougher diet. The soft leaves of the rainforest were gone, replaced by abrasive, low-nutrient eucalyptus. This led to the rise of powerful grazers and browsers with grinding teeth and slow, efficient digestive systems. And because there were few large placental predators to chase them down, they were free to explore a different evolutionary path. They could get big, very big. This is how you get a wombat the size of a rhinoceros. The diprotodon, which we glimpsed at our first dawn, was a product of this environment. It didn't need to be fast. It needed to be a walking fermentation tank, capable of processing enormous quantities of tough vegetation. Its sheer size was its primary defense. What could possibly threaten a creature that weighed nearly 3 tons? The answer, of course, is that the predators evolved alongside them. With no placental carnivores like lions, tigers, or bears, the role of apex predator in Australia was filled by other groups. And they filled it in terrifyingly creative ways. The marsupials produced their own version of a big cat. But this was no cat. This was Thylacoleo carnifex, the marsupial lion. It did not have canine teeth for piercing. Instead, its front incisors evolved into huge, bolt-cutter-like blades for shearing through flesh and bone. Its jaw was pound for pound the most powerful of any mammal that has ever lived. It was a creature built not for chasing, but for ambush and overwhelming force. A silent, climbing predator that could drop from a tree and end a life in an instant. The reptiles also took advantage of the evolutionary vacuum. With no large mammalian carnivores to compete with, lizards were free to grow to monstrous proportions. This gave the world Megalania, a goanna or monitor lizard that reached lengths of up to 20 feet. It was a venomous, armored predator that moved with a slow, reptilian confidence. It didn't need to be warm-blooded and energetic. It could wait. It could bide its time, basking in the sun, a living mountain of scales and teeth, the undisputed king of the continent. Even the crocodiles evolved differently. While some remained tied to the water, a new kind of predator emerged, the terrestrial crocodile. Quincana, a crocodile that didn't lurk in rivers, but ran on long legs across the open plains, chasing down its prey like a reptilian wolf. Imagine the terror of being pursued not by a mammal, but by a creature from a far more ancient lineage, its cold, unblinking eyes fixed on you. And then there were the birds. With few large ground predators in the early days, some birds abandoned flight. And like the herbivores, with this freedom, they grew to titanic sizes. They became the demon ducks of doom and thunderbirds of paleontological fame. Birds like Dromornis and Genyornis, standing up to 10 feet tall, weighing over 1,000 pounds, with massive, crushing beaks. They were not gentle giants. They were aggressive, territorial, and powerful enough to kill with a single kick or a bite from their axe-like heads. This, then, is the result of isolation. A menagerie of evolutionary horrors, each perfectly adapted to its unique, harsh world. It was a land of marsupial giants, reptilian dragons, and killer birds. A world where the familiar roles of predator and prey were played by a different cast of characters. The very landscape co-evolved with these creatures. The tough, inflammable eucalyptus forests were shaped by fire, a force that cleared the underbrush and spurred new growth. The megafauna, in turn, adapted to this fire-prone environment. Some animals learned to seek refuge, while others perhaps learned to use it to their advantage, scavenging after a burn. This was a balanced ecosystem, but it was a balance built on principles of terror and raw power. It was a world in a delicate, dangerous equilibrium. It had been this way for millions of years. The rules were set, the players were established. And then, into this ancient, isolated world, something new arrived. A creature that had not been part of the Australian experiment. A frail, bipedal ape, armed not with immense size or crushing jaws, but with a new kind of weapon. A thinking, planning, cooperative mind. The arrival of the first humans on this continent was like a stone thrown into a still ancient pond. The ripples would spread, and nothing would ever be the same again. They had stepped out of the world of placental mammals and into a land that evolution had forgotten to update. They were entering a living museum of prehistoric life, a place where the monsters were real. And they had no idea what was waiting for them in the shadows of the ghost gums or by the silent shores of the billabongs. They were about to come face to face with the products of 50 million years of splendid, terrifying isolation.
The first footprints. Early humans arrive. Let us return to that ancient landscape. But this time, we are not just a disembodied observer. We are one of them, one of the first. Imagine the journey, a crossing of the sea, not a vast open ocean, but a series of shorter voyages between islands, made possible by lower sea levels. Still, it was a voyage into the unknown, on rafts of bamboo or wood, propelled by paddle and current and courage. You are part of a small band, a family, a clan. You have left the familiar world of Southeast Asia behind, and then you see it. A new coastline, a smudge of red and green on the horizon, the great southern land. Your raft scrapes against a sandy beach. You step off, and your feet are the first human feet to ever touch this soil. The sand is warm, the air dry, the scent is alien, that powerful medicinal smell of eucalyptus. The sounds are all wrong. The birdsong is a cacophony of shrieks and whistles you don't recognize. The insect hum is a different, deeper drone. You are a stranger in a strange land, an intruder. Your people are skilled survivors. You know how to find water,
how to knap stone into sharp tools, how to read the tracks of animals. You know the rhythm of the seasons, the use of fire. You are the most adaptable, resourceful primate the world has ever known. But all of your knowledge is based on a different world. A world of deer, tigers, monkeys, and wild boar. Here, the rule book has been thrown away. You venture inland from the coast, moving cautiously. The landscape is open, but the trees are tall and cast deep, unfamiliar shadows. You see your first kangaroo. Not the familiar red or gray kangaroo of the modern world, but something far more imposing. It is Procoptodon, the giant short-faced kangaroo. It stands 10 feet tall, with a flat, almost humanoid face and a single large toe on each foot, like a hoof. It doesn't hop gracefully. It walks, striding through the woodland. You watch as it reaches up with its long, muscular arms, pulling a high branch down to its mouth. On each hand, you see long, sharp claws. This is not a gentle herbivore. This is something else entirely. Something that could kill you with a single kick or a swipe of its powerful arms. Your group makes camp near a small creek bed, a lifeline in this dry world. As dusk falls, you build a fire. The fire is more than just for cooking or warmth. It is a shield. It is a bubble of familiar light and sound in an overwhelming darkness. The flames crackle and spit, and for a while, the world feels smaller, safer. But the night is not silent. As the last light of the sun vanishes, the sounds of the day are replaced by the sounds of the night. A low growl echoes from the rocks above your camp. It is not the growl of a big cat you know. It is deeper, with a strange guttural rattle. You and your companions fall silent, clutching your spears, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. The growling stops, but the feeling of being watched remains. Later, you are awakened by a sound of immense weight, a heavy, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It is the sound of something huge walking nearby. Peeking over a rock, you see a herd of Diprotodon, the giant wombats, making their way to the creek in the moonlight. They are colossal, their shaggy coats silvered by the pale light. They move with a slow, ponderous grace, their small eyes reflecting the firelight like distant embers. They are not aggressive, but their sheer scale is terrifying. A stampede, a single moment of panic, and your small camp would be obliterated. You learn quickly. You see the tracks of the giant lizard, Megalania, in the dried mud of the creek bed, a wide, serpentine trail with the marks of huge claws on either side. You learn to recognize its scent on the air, a dry, musky odor. You learn that to be caught in the open by this creature is death. It doesn't need to be fast. It just needs to get close once. You learn about the trees. One day, a hunter from your group is resting beneath a large, shady tree. There is a rustle from above, not a bird. Something heavier. He looks up and sees a pair of eyes looking down, and then it drops. Philocolio, the marsupial lion. It is a blur of tan fur and muscle. Its powerful legs absorb the impact of the fall, and its huge bolt-cutter incisors find their mark. The attack is silent, swift, and utterly final. Your people learn that the trees are not safe, the ground is not safe, the water is not safe. You are a hunter, but you are also the hunted. Every journey for food or water is a gamble. You move in groups, your heads constantly scanning, your ears straining to interpret the strange new sounds. You learn to read this new world. You learn that the flocking of certain birds means a predator is near. You learn which plants are safe to eat and which will bring a feverish death. You learn this through trial and through tragic, fatal error. Your greatest weapon is your mind. You are not stronger than a diprotodon, or faster than a quincana, or more powerful than a thylacoleo. But you can think, you can plan, you can communicate, you can set traps. You can use fire not just as a shield, but as a weapon. You learn to drive herds of giant kangaroos towards a cliff edge, or into a muddy bog where they become trapped. You learn to hunt the giant birds, Ganiornis, by stealing their enormous eggs from their nests, a high-risk, high-reward strategy that could feed your family for a week, but only if you are not caught by the furious protective parents. Life is a constant, humming tension. The world is beautiful in a stark and brutal way. The sunsets paint the sky in colors you have never seen. The night sky, free from any competing light, is a glittering blanket of stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. You feel a deep connection to this land, a spiritual reverence for its power and its unforgiving nature. But you are always afraid. It is a low-level, constant hum of fear. The snap of a twig behind you, a shadow that moves when the wind is still, a new set of tracks near your camp in the morning. This is the bargain of being the first. You are pioneers in a world that does not want you. You are forging a new life in a land of monsters. Every sunrise you live to see is a victory. Every child that grows to adulthood is a miracle. You are changing the land with your fires and your hunts, but the land is also changing you. It is hardening you, sharpening your senses, etching its powerful, terrifying rhythms into your very soul. You are becoming a part of this place, your own stories and myths beginning to weave themselves into the ancient fabric of the continent. You are the first footprints, and you have brought with you the first embers of a change that will one day consume the giants and leave only their ghosts.
Survival without second chances. Let us settle into the reality of this world. The daily, moment-to-moment struggle for existence. The wonder of the giant creatures is one thing. Living alongside them is another. In prehistoric Australia, survival was a craft practiced without the luxury of a mistake. There were no second chances. The most fundamental challenge, the one that governed every decision, was water. Today, Australia is the driest inhabited continent on Earth. 50,000 years ago, it was in the grip of an ice age. This may sound like a contradiction, ice and dryness, but on the great southern continent, the effect was profound. Much of the world's water was locked up in massive polar ice caps, leading to a global drop in sea levels and rainfall. Australia became even more arid than it is today. Water was life, and it was agonizingly scarce. Imagine your clan. Every day begins and ends with the thought of water. You do not drink freely. You do not wash for leisure. Every drop is precious, carried in skins or gourds. The search for it is a constant, perilous quest. You follow the dry, sandy beds of ephemeral rivers, looking for the places where water might still lie trapped beneath the surface. You learn to recognize the trees and plants that signal its presence, their roots tapping into some hidden reservoir. You dig for it, scraping away at the hot sand with your bare hands, with sticks and stones, hoping to see that first dark patch of moisture, the miracle of water seeping up from the earth.
But you are not the only one who needs to drink. The water holes, the few permanent sources of water, were the most dangerous places on the continent. They were the great meeting places, the oases of life. But they were also traps. To approach a water hole was to willingly walk into an ambush. Picture the scene: a pool of murky water, surrounded by cracked mud and a ring of trampled vegetation. The air is heavy with the smell of stagnant water and animal life. You approach with extreme caution, moving from cover to cover, your senses on high alert. The silence here is different. It is not empty, it is filled with tension. In the reeds at the far end of the pool, you might see the ridged back of a giant freshwater crocodile, Palimnarchus. It lies perfectly still, looking like a half-submerged log. It can wait for hours, for days, for a thirsty creature to lower its head. In the scrubby trees overlooking the water, the marsupial lion, Thylacoleo, could be perched, a silent, muscular shadow, waiting for the perfect moment to drop. And in the open, sun-baked earth near the pool, a megalania might be basking, its patterned skin providing perfect camouflage against the rock and soil. It, too, is waiting. The waterhole is a theater of death. You must weigh your thirst against the risk. You send a scout ahead. You wait. You watch for hours, observing the behavior of other animals. If the birds are quiet, if there are no other creatures drinking, something is wrong. You learn to trust this instinct, this deep primal sense of danger. Sometimes the safest decision is to leave, to endure the thirst and hope to find a smaller, safer soak somewhere else. Shelter is the next great challenge. The climate was one of extremes. The days were fiercely hot, with a sun that could kill an unprotected human in heat stroke in a matter of hours. The nights, especially in the southern parts of the continent, could be surprisingly, bitterly cold. You have no permanent home. You are nomadic, following the resources, the seasons, and the water. Shelter is opportunistic. A shallow cave in a sandstone cliff, a dense thicket of trees, a lean-to constructed from branches and bark. These shelters offer protection from the sun and the wind, but they are fragile defenses against the world's predators. A cave might seem like the perfect refuge, but you are not the first to have that idea. You must check it carefully. Is it already occupied? By a snake? By a Thylacoleo, which were known to use caves as lairs? You learn to read the signs, the scratch marks on the walls, the scent in the air, the presence of old cracked bones on the floor. To enter the wrong cave is to walk into a predator's den. Food is a constant, exhausting pursuit. The idea of a paleo diet is a modern romanticism. The reality was a desperate, unending search for calories. You hunted, yes. You pursued kangaroos, wallabies, and emus. A successful hunt of a large animal was a time of great celebration, a temporary reprieve from hunger. But hunts often failed. Spears could miss. Animals could escape. Hunters could be injured, or worse, killed. A significant portion of your diet came from less glamorous sources. It was the food you gathered: roots and tubers dug from the hard ground, small lizards and snakes, insects, grubs pulled from the roots of a tree, bird eggs if you were brave and lucky enough to find a nest and evade its guardians. You learned an immense, complex botanical and zoological knowledge, passed down through generations. This plant is food. This one is medicine. This one with the milky sap is poison. Make a mistake, and you die. Every aspect of life was fraught with a danger we can barely comprehend. A simple cut from a sharp rock or a spinifex spine could be a death sentence. Without antibiotics, any wound could become infected, leading to a slow, agonizing death from sepsis. A broken leg was not an inconvenience, it was a catastrophe. A person who could not walk, who could not keep up with the group, was a liability. The choices the clan had to make in such situations were brutal, born of necessity. And then there was the ever-present psychological toll. The constant vigilance, the gnawing anxiety, the grief of losing members of your small band to predators, to sickness, to accidents. There was no room for complacency. A moment of inattention, of distraction, could be your last. Imagine the senses of these people. Their hearing would have been tuned to a razor's edge, able to distinguish the footstep of a friend from the stealthy tread of a predator. Their eyesight would be sharp, constantly scanning the horizon, the tree line, the shadows. Their sense of smell would be a vital tool, detecting water, food, and danger on the wind. This was not a life of peaceful contemplation in a natural paradise. It was a life of high-stakes, high-stress survival, a knife-edge existence where the margin between life and death was vanishingly thin. And yet, they didn't just survive, they thrived. They spread across the entire continent, from the tropical north to the cold, wind-swept shores of Tasmania, which was then connected to the mainland. They adapted to every environment Australia could throw at them. They developed complex social structures, deep spiritual beliefs, and stunning works of art, painted on rock walls that still survive today. They did this by being smarter, more cooperative, and more resilient than anything the continent had ever seen before. They faced a world without second chances, and they won. But the cost was high, and the memory of the terror and the struggle would be woven into their stories and their lore for the next 50,000 years.
No safe nights. The darkness wasn't quiet. The sun sinks below the horizon. The fierce, brilliant light of day softens, and for a few moments the world is bathed in a gentle, bruised purple. The heat begins to bleed out of the red earth. In our modern world, night is a time of rest, of retreat into the safety of our homes, where the darkness is held at bay by electric light. But here, in prehistoric Australia, the coming of night is not an invitation to rest. It is a transition. The world does not go to sleep. It awakens. The creatures of the day retreat to their dens and roosts, and a new cast of characters emerges from the shadows. The darkness was not empty. It was full, and it was not quiet. Let us sit by that small, flickering campfire once more. The circle of light it casts seems so small, so fragile in the vast, enveloping darkness of the bush. The flames dance, and the shadows they cast leap and writhe like living things. Beyond this little bubble of warmth and light, the world belongs to the night. Close your eyes for a moment and just listen. First, there is the baseline hum, the chorus of the night insects. Crickets, katydids, and 1,000 other tiny creatures create a constant, shimmering wall of sound. It is the heartbeat of the nocturnal world. Then, layered on top of that, come the individual voices. From the trees above, a sound like a soft, mournful hoo-hoo echoes. It is a powerful owl, its huge eyes adapted to pierce the gloom. Its call is a comforting, familiar sound to your clan, but it is also a reminder of the hunters that patrol the air, their flight silent as death, searching for any small, unwary creature moving on the ground below. A sudden, frantic rustling in a nearby bush, followed by a sharp squeal that is cut off abruptly. The owl has found its meal. A moment of violence in the dark, and then the chorus of insects resumes, indifferent. From further away, a different sound, a churring, guttural growl that seems to come from the ground itself. It is low, and it carries. This is not a sound you welcome. You have learned it is the call of a quoll, a marsupial carnivore. But these are not the small cat-sized quolls of today. In the Pleistocene, a giant species, Dasyurus magnus, prowled the forests. It was a powerfully built predator, the size of a large dog, and it was fearless. Its call is a signal to keep your children close to the fire. The darkness plays tricks on the eyes. Every gnarled tree trunk, every dark rock takes on a new shape in the flickering firelight. Is that a stump or a creature hunkering down, watching? Your mind, honed by generations of survival, is wired to see patterns, to assume the worst. A log of wood becomes a basking crocodile. A low-hanging branch becomes the arm of a waiting predator. A new sound begins, a rhythmic, heavy scraping. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. It is coming from the direction of a rocky outcrop not far from your camp. It is the sound of a large animal sharpening its claws on stone. You know this sound. It is a warning, a territorial display. It could be a giant goanna, a megalania, settling in for the night, its cold blood slowly adjusting to the cool air. Or perhaps it is something else, something that climbs. You remember the stories, the warnings from the elders, about the silent hunter, the drop cat, Philo Leo. While primarily active at dawn and dusk, it was a creature perfectly at home in the dark. Its eyes, it was said, could gather the faintest starlight. It did not need to see you clearly. It only needed to sense your warmth, your movement. The scraping sound stops. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the noise it replaced. Where is it now? Is it watching? The moon begins to rise, a sliver of bone-white light. It does not illuminate the world so much as it creates deeper, darker shadows. And in this pale, ghostly light, you see movement. At the edge of the clearing, a shape detaches itself from the darkness. It is huge, hunched, and moving with a slow, deliberate gait. It is a diprotodon, the giant wombat. Alone this time. It lumbers past your camp, seemingly oblivious to your presence, its small eyes catching the moonlight. You hold your breath. It is not a predator, but its sheer size is a threat. A wrong move, a sudden noise could startle it. And a 3-ton animal, panicked in the dark, is a force of pure destruction. It passes, and its heavy footsteps fade into the night. But the night holds stranger things than giant wombats. A chilling, maniacal cackle echoes from the distance. It sounds like a distorted, hellish laugh. It is the sound of the Tasmanian devil. But again, not the small, cantankerous scavenger of the modern island. The Pleistocene mainland had its own population, and they were larger, more robust. They were the cleanup crew of this ancient world, their powerful jaws capable of crushing bone to powder. Their laughter is the sound of a carcass being discovered, of a feast beginning. It is a morbid, unsettling sound that reminds you of the constant cycle of death and consumption that defines this land. Later, as the fire dies down to glowing embers, you hear the most terrifying sound of the night. It is not loud. It is a soft, heavy tread, the sound of padded feet on dry leaves. And it is close. Too close. Every muscle in your body tenses. You slowly reach for the spear lying beside you. Your heart is a drum in your ears. You strain your eyes, trying to peer into the Stygian blackness just beyond the dying fire. You see nothing, but you can feel it. A presence, a predator's focused, hungry attention. A low growl, so deep that it is almost a vibration, rumbles through the ground. It is the marsupial lion. It has circled your camp. It is testing your defenses. It is looking for a weakness, an opening, a child who has strayed too far from the light, an adult who has fallen asleep on watch. You and your companions rise, holding your spears, shouting into the darkness, making yourselves seem large and formidable. You throw another log onto the fire, and it erupts in a shower of sparks and renewed light. The growling stops. The presence recedes. For now. You do not sleep deeply. No one does. Sleep is a series of short, fitful rests, one eye always half open, one ear always listening. The night is a siege. You are a small island of life in an ocean of darkness, and the tide is filled with teeth and claws. The night was not a time of peace. It was simply a different kind of war, a quieter, more suspenseful battle for survival, fought with fire and vigilance and courage against the things that owned the dark. And the greatest relief, the most profound moment of gratitude in this world, was the first faint hint of gray in the eastern sky, the promise of the sun, the signal that you had survived one more night in a land where the darkness was never, ever quiet.
Megalania, the 20-foot venomous dragon. Let us leave the relative safety of the fire and walk out into the shimmering heat of the Australian Pleistocene midday. The sun is a white-hot coin in a bleached blue sky. The air ripples, distorting the horizon. Most sensible creatures are seeking shelter, hiding from the oppressive heat in burrows or in the deep shade of a rocky overhang. But not everything rests. Some creatures are forged by the sun, their bodies perfectly in tune with its brutal energy. We are looking for one such animal, the apex predator of this entire continent, a creature so large, so powerful, that it has passed into the realm of myth. We are looking for Megalania. The name itself is a whisper of its nature. Megalania priscus. It means ancient great roamer. But to the first humans who saw it, it would have had a simpler, more potent name: dragon. Find a shady spot, a high vantage point overlooking a dry, rocky plain dotted with sparse vegetation. Now, we wait. This creature does not hurry. It is a master of patience, a being that operates on a geological timescale. We must learn its rhythm. Look at that large, flat expanse of rock over there. It seems to be part of the landscape, mottled in shades of gray, brown, and ochre. It has been sitting perfectly still for the past hour. But watch it. Watch it closely. A flicker of movement. An eyelid covered in skin like ancient leather slides open, revealing a cold, obsidian eye. It is an eye that does not show fear or anger or any emotion you can recognize. It is the eye of a reptile, ancient and calculating. Then a long, forked, purple-black tongue, a full foot in length, flicks out from its mouth, tasting the air. It is gathering information, smelling the world in 3 dimensions, searching for the scent of life or the scent of death. Slowly, the rock begins to move. It unfolds itself. 4 powerful, thick legs emerge from a body of immense girth. A long, muscular tail, a heavy rudder, and a brutal weapon rests on the ground behind it. The head lifts, mounted on a thick, powerful neck. The rock is in fact a lizard, the largest terrestrial lizard that has ever lived. It is difficult to convey the scale of Megalania.
Imagine a large saltwater crocodile. Now give it a broader, more robust body and put it on land. It could reach lengths of 20 feet, perhaps more. It could weigh over 1,000 pounds, maybe close to 2,000 pounds. Its hide was not smooth, but studded with bony deposits called osteoderms, creating a flexible, natural coat of mail. It was a walking fortress. It begins to move, and the sound is a slow, heavy drag and scrape, the sound of immense weight being pulled across the earth. It moves with a low-slung, deliberate swagger, its body swaying from side to side. It is not built for a chase. It is built for ambush and for unstoppable, inexorable pursuit. Let's imagine its prey. A young diprotodon has wandered from its herd, seeking a particularly lush patch of shrubs. It is careless. It feels safe, protected by its size. It weighs perhaps half a ton. The megalania has scented it on the air from a mile away. It has spent the last hour moving into position, using every rock and bush as cover, its patterned skin making it seem to fade into the landscape. Now it is coiled in the shadows of a cluster of boulders, just yards from the unsuspecting giant wombat. The attack is a sudden, shocking explosion of reptilian speed. In a blur of motion, the lizard lunges forward. It is not aiming for the throat, not trying for a quick, clean kill. Its mouth gapes open, revealing rows of serrated, blade-like teeth. It clamps down on the diprotodon's hind leg, its powerful jaws crushing muscle and bone. But the teeth are not the primary weapon. The true horror of Megalania's bite was what it left behind. Like its modern relative, the Komodo dragon, Megalania's mouth was a venomous sewer. A complex cocktail of toxins was pumped into the wound from glands in its lower jaw. This venom was not a neurotoxin that killed quickly. It was something far more insidious. It was a hemotoxin, designed to prevent blood from clotting. The lizard releases its grip and retreats. Its work is done. The wounded diprotodon bellows in pain and terror and hobbles away. It thinks it has escaped, but it is already dead. This is where the true nightmare of a megalania hunt begins. The slow, patient pursuit. The giant lizard begins to follow its prey. It does not need to hurry. It walks at a steady, unbothered pace, its forked tongue constantly tasting the air, following the scent of blood and fear. The venom is doing its gruesome work. The wound on the diprotodon's leg will not stop bleeding. The toxins are spreading through its bloodstream, causing a catastrophic drop in blood pressure. The animal becomes weak, disoriented, dizzy. It lies down to rest, but the blood continues to seep from the wound. Every time it struggles to its feet, the exertion makes the bleeding worse. The megalania just follows. It might follow for hours, or even for a full day. It is a terrifying, silent shadow, always there, just at the edge of sight, an inevitable, scaly angel of death. It watches as its victim grows weaker and weaker, until it can no longer stand. Only then, when the great beast has collapsed from blood loss and shock, does the megalania move in to feed. There is no struggle. There is only the slow, methodical process of consumption. Now, imagine being a human in this world. You are small, soft, and thin-skinned. A bite from a megalania would be an absolute death sentence. There would be no escape, no antidote, only a slow, agonizing wait for the end, with the terrifying knowledge that the creature that bit you is following, patiently waiting for you to fall. This creature would have been a central figure in the nightmares of the first people. It was a dragon made real. It was intelligent for a reptile. It could solve problems. It could learn. It would have seen humans as easy, slow-moving prey. Encounters would have been terrifyingly intimate. A hunter tracking a kangaroo might look up and realize that the log he was about to step over was not a log. A family sheltering in a cave might awaken to find a massive scaly head peering into the entrance, its black tongue tasting the scent of their sleeping bodies. To survive in a land with megalania, you would need a new level of awareness. You would learn to fear open, rocky country. You would learn to recognize its tracks, its scent, the scrape of its belly on stone. You would learn that some shadows were not cast by rocks. The existence of megalania reshapes our entire understanding of Pleistocene Australia. It was not just a land of strange marsupials. It was a reptile's kingdom. And megalania was its undisputed, venomous, patient king. It was a monster born of deep time, a perfect predator for a harsh and brutal land. And its ghost still haunts the hottest, driest, and most forbidding corners of the continent.
Diprotodon, giant wombat the size of a car. Let us now turn our attention from the hunter to the hunted. But in prehistoric Australia, the line between the two was often dangerously blurred. We are going to observe a creature that at first glance seems gentle, peaceful, almost comical. But to underestimate it would be a fatal mistake. We move to a woodland, a forest of tall eucalypts and thick undergrowth. The air is cooler here, shaded from the direct sun. Dappled light filters through the canopy, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. The dominant sound is the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional crack of a twig under immense weight. Through the trees, a family group is moving. These are the creatures we have glimpsed before, the largest marsupials ever to walk the earth. These are Diprotodon uptatum. The name means two forward teeth, a reference to the two large, tusk-like incisors that protrude from its lower jaw. But the name does little to capture the sheer presence of the animal. Find a comfortable place to sit, behind a large fern tree, and watch them. The largest individual, a mature male, is the size of a white rhinoceros or a small family car. He stands nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder and weighs close to 3 tons. His body is a barrel of muscle and gut, covered in a coat of thick, shaggy reddish-brown fur. His head is large, with a broad, flat nose and small, dark eyes set wide apart. He looks, for all the world, like a wombat that has been fed a diet of growth hormones and nightmares. His feet are pillar-like, designed to support his incredible weight. And his gait is slow, ponderous, a deliberate rocking motion as he moves through the forest. He seems to be the very definition of a gentle giant. He and his family, several females and a few younger individuals, are browsing. They are not grazing on grass, but feeding on the leaves, shoots, and roots of shrubs and trees. The male rears up on his powerful hind legs, placing his front feet against the trunk of a large bush. With a slow, inexorable push, he forces it over its roots tearing from the ground like ripping canvas. Then he and his family descend upon it, using their sharp front teeth to strip the leaves and their powerful molars to grind the tough vegetation. They are living, breathing bulldozers, constantly reshaping the environment around them. Their passage through the forest creates clearings, opens up the understory, and spreads seeds. They are a keystone species, a vital part of the ecological machinery of this ancient world. For the most part, they are peaceful. Their primary defense is their size. What predator would be foolish enough to take on a healthy 3-ton adult? Even a pack of thylaco or a full-grown megalania would think twice. The risk of being crushed, gored by those powerful incisors, or kicked by a leg with the force of a battering ram was simply too great. But this peacefulness is a fragile thing. It is the calm of an animal that has no natural enemies and expects to be given a wide berth. It is not accustomed to being challenged or surprised. And that is where the danger lies. Imagine your small human clan moving through the same stretch of forest. You are quiet, cautious. But a child stumbles, letting out a sharp cry, or a spear, carelessly held, clatters against a rock. The lead Diprotodon freezes. His head, which had been low to the ground, snaps up. His small ears twitch. He emits a low, rumbling growl from deep within his chest. It is a sound of warning, a sound that says, "I am here. Do not approach." His posture changes. The slow, placid browser is gone. In its place is a mountain of tense muscle. He takes a step forward, his weight making the ground vibrate. He scrapes one of his front feet on the ground, a clear sign of agitation. You and your people freeze. You know what this means. You have seen it before. You must not run. To run is to trigger a chase response. And while a Diprotodon cannot run fast for long, its initial charge is terrifyingly swift. It is a charge with the momentum of a runaway truck. If that charge comes, there is no defense. A spear would be a toothpick against its thick hide and massive bones. A human body would be a fragile doll, trampled into the earth without a second thought. The only hope is to stand your ground, to seem non-threatening, and to pray that the giant's agitation subsides. The danger was not always from a direct confrontation. These animals were creatures of habit. They carved deep, well-worn paths through the landscape as they moved between feeding grounds and water sources. To inadvertently make your camp on or near one of these Diprotodon highways was to risk being trampled in the dead of night. And what of their intelligence? Marsupial brains are structured differently from those of placental mammals. They are often perceived as less intelligent, but this is likely a misunderstanding. Theirs is a different kind of intelligence, one honed for their specific environment. A Diprotodon would have had a complex mental map of its territory, an encyclopedic knowledge of which plants were edible and where to find water in a drought. We see evidence of their struggles in the fossil record. During times of extreme drought, vast numbers of Diprotodon congregated at the last remaining waterholes. Places like Lake Callabona in South Australia have yielded the fossils of hundreds of individuals who became trapped in the deep, clinging mud as the water receded. It is a poignant, tragic scene. A graveyard of giants, lured to their doom by the promise of water. These creatures were a walking resource for the first humans, but a phenomenally dangerous one to acquire. A single successful hunt of a diprotodon could feed a clan for weeks. The meat, the fat, the thick hide, nothing would be wasted. But how to achieve it? It would have required immense planning, cooperation, and courage, perhaps driving a single animal into a pit trap or using fire to separate a younger, smaller individual from the protection of its herd. It would have been the most dangerous game imaginable, a battle of wits and tools against sheer, overwhelming bulk. Every hunt would have been a life or death gamble. A miscalculation, a moment of hesitation, and the hunters would become the victims. So as we watch this giant wombat-like creature strip leaves from a branch, let us not be fooled by its placid appearance. It is a symbol of the raw, untamed power of this continent. It is a reminder that in prehistoric Australia, even the herbivores were monsters. They were living, breathing mountains of fur and muscle, and they commanded respect. To forget that, even for a moment, was to risk being erased from the landscape by a creature that might not even notice it had killed you.
Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion with bone-crushing jaws. Let us now move to the shadows. We have seen the great lizard that ruled the open plains and the giant herbivore that bulldozed the forests. Now we must look for a predator that mastered a different domain, the vertical world of the trees, and the terrifying art of the ambush. We are in a denser part of the forest where the canopy is thick and the ground is a patchwork of deep shade and bright sunlight. The air is still and heavy. It feels quiet. Too quiet. The birds have stopped singing. The insects have fallen silent. This is a silence that speaks of fear. It is the silence of prey that knows it is being watched. Look up. Scan the branches of the large eucalyptus trees, not the thin outer branches, but the thick, sturdy limbs close to the trunk. Look for something that doesn't belong, a shape that is out of place. There, on a limb about 30 feet up, it is a splash of tawny, sand-colored fur, dappled by the light filtering through the leaves. It is almost perfectly camouflaged. It is utterly motionless. This is Thylacoleo carnifex, the pouched lion and executioner. The name is both a misnomer and a chillingly accurate description. It is not a lion. It is not a cat at all. It is a marsupial, a distant relative of the wombats and koalas, but evolution has twisted this gentle lineage into a killing machine of unparalleled efficiency. Let's study its form. It is about the size of a small lioness or a jaguar, but it is built far more robustly. Its body is a compact mass of muscle, especially in its shoulders and forelimbs. It has the physique of a powerlifter, not a sprinter. It was not built to chase down prey over long distances. It was built for a short, explosive burst of devastating power. Its paws are remarkable. The front paws have retractable claws, like a cat, perfect for gripping bark and flesh. And on each front paw is an enormous, hooked thumb claw, a dew claw that functioned like a switchblade. This was its grappling hook, used to hold on to struggling prey and to help it climb. But the true terror of Thylacoleo was its head. Its skull was short, wide, and massively boned, and its teeth were unlike those of any other predator. It had no use for canine fangs. Instead, its front incisor teeth were enormous, like a pair of horizontal chisels. And behind them, its premolars had evolved into huge, shearing blades, like a pair of secateurs or bolt cutters. Pound for pound, Thylacoleo had the most powerful bite of any mammal, living or extinct. Its jaw was not designed for delicate bites. It was designed to inflict a single, catastrophic wound, shearing through muscle, sinew, and bone with contemptuous ease. The carnifex, executioner part of its name, was well earned. Let's imagine its hunting strategy. It is perched on that branch, a silent, patient observer. It can stay there for hours, its energy conserved, waiting for the right moment. Its prey is a herd of Protemnodon, a large, robust species of wallaby browsing on the forest floor below. Thylacoleo is not watching the herd, it is watching one individual. It has selected its target, a young adult, slightly separated from the others. The predator does not descend the tree. It doesn't need to. It simply lets go. It drops from the branch, a silent 250-pound missile of fur and muscle. It is not a clumsy fall. It is a controlled plummet. It uses its broad tail as a rudder, steering its descent. It lands squarely on the back of the unsuspecting wallaby, its powerful legs absorbing the impact. The chaos is instantaneous. The wallaby shrieks in terror. The rest of the herd explodes in a panic, scattering in all directions. But it is too late for the chosen victim. Thylacoleo's huge thumb claws dig in, anchoring it to the struggling animal, and then the bite. It drives its huge incisor teeth into the back of the wallaby's neck or skull. The force is immense. There is a sickening crunch of bone. The spinal cord is severed. The life is extinguished in a fraction of a second. The attack was silent, swift, and brutally efficient. You wouldn't hear it coming. You would only hear the result. Now Thylacoleo has a problem. It has a large carcass on the forest floor, and the sounds of the kill will soon attract scavengers, quolls, Tasmanian devils, perhaps even a curious megalania. So it does something remarkable. Gripping the carcass with its powerful jaws, it begins to drag it, and it drags it to the base of the nearest large tree. Then, using its incredible upper body strength and its climbing claws, it begins to haul its kill up the trunk, securing it in a high fork, away from the ground-based competition. This is a behavior we see with modern leopards, and it is a sign of a highly intelligent and adaptable predator. Caves across Australia, particularly in the Nullarbor Plain, have been found littered with the bones of thousands of animals. For a long time, paleontologists thought these were natural trap caves. But on closer inspection, they found strange marks on the bones, slicing, shearing marks that matched the unique teeth of Thylacoleo, and scratch marks on the cave walls, consistent with a creature that could climb. The horrifying realization dawned. These were not trap caves. They were Thylacoleo lairs. The marsupial lion was dragging its prey, kangaroos, wallabies, even young diprotodon, into these caves to be consumed in safety or to feed its young. Some caves were even nurseries, with the bones of countless prey animals piled up, the leftovers from generations of marsupial lion families. To the first humans, Thylacoleo would have been a creature from a nightmare, a silent, arboreal predator that you would never see coming. It was the drop bear of legend, made terrifyingly real. A walk through the forest was a walk underneath its hunting grounds. Resting under a shady tree was a potentially fatal decision. Even the perceived safety of a cave could be a deadly illusion, as you might be unwittingly trespassing in a lion's den. It was a creature that broke all the rules, a marsupial that had evolved to fill the niche of a great cat, but had done so with a completely different and arguably more terrifying set of tools. It was not a lion, But to the first people who had to live in its shadow, it was something far, far worse. It was a silent, climbing, bone-crushing executioner.
Procoptodon, the boxer kangaroo that could kill. We have become accustomed to the image of the kangaroo, a graceful hopping icon of the Australian bush, a gentle herbivore with a placid nature. Now, I want you to erase that image from your mind. We are about to meet its ancestor, and this creature was anything but gentle. Let's move out of the dense forest and into a more open woodland, a savanna-like environment with grassy clearings and scattered groves of trees. The sun is high, and the air is filled with the drone of insects. And it is here that we find a herd of them. At first glance, they look like kangaroos, but everything about them is bigger, stranger, and more intimidating. This is Procoptodon Goliath, the giant short-faced kangaroo. Stand behind a thicket of acacia and observe. The first thing you notice is the size. A large male stands erect, and its head is 10 feet off the ground. It weighs over 500 pounds, making it the largest kangaroo that ever lived. It is not just a scaled-up version of a modern roo. Its proportions are all wrong. Its face is the most unsettling feature. It is short, broad, and flat, with its eyes facing forward, giving it an unnervingly humanoid or primate-like gaze. This was not the timid sideways glance of a prey animal. This was the direct, steady gaze of a creature that was not afraid. Its body is immensely powerful, a deep chest and long muscular arms that are surprisingly well developed. And at the end of those arms are the hands. Each hand has 2 long fingers tipped with wickedly long, sharp claws. They look like grappling hooks or the weapons of a giant predatory bird. And then there are the feet. Unlike modern kangaroos, which have 3 main toes, Procoptodon had evolved to have only one massive hoof-like toe on each foot. This was an adaptation for bearing its immense weight and for efficient locomotion. But it did not hop like a modern kangaroo. The biomechanics don't support it. Instead, scientists believe it walked, striding bipedally through the landscape like a giant furry cyclops. A herd of them moving together would have been a thunderous, intimidating sight. Watch as one of the males feeds. It doesn't graze on the grass at its feet. Instead, it reaches up with its long clawed arms, hooks a high branch of a eucalyptus tree, and effortlessly pulls it down to its mouth. It then strips a leaves with its powerful grinding teeth. It is a high browser, occupying a niche that no kangaroo does today. This creature was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, perfectly adapted to its environment. But it was not a passive herbivore. Like the Diprotodon, its size and power were its defense, and it would have been incredibly dangerous if threatened. Let's imagine a scenario. A pair of Thylacoleo, the marsupial lions, are stalking this herd. They are patient, looking for a smaller, weaker individual, a juvenile that has strayed from its mother. They begin their attack, a coordinated rush from the scrub. But the big male Procoptodon sees them. He doesn't flee. He turns to face the threat,
He rears up to his full, terrifying height. He emits a deep, guttural cough, a sound of pure aggression, and he raises his arms, spreading his clawed fingers. He looks like a bare-knuckle boxer, ready for a fight. This is where the term boxer kangaroo becomes chillingly literal. A modern kangaroo can defend itself with powerful kicks, using its tail as a third leg for balance. Procoptodon, with its rigid spine and different anatomy, likely fought differently. It would have used its immense upper body strength. It could grab a predator with those powerful arms. It could slash with those terrible claws, capable of disemboweling an attacker. It could push, shoving a thylacoleo with enough force to send it tumbling. And of course, it could still kick. A forward kick from that single hoof-like toe would have the force of a sledgehammer, capable of shattering bone and crushing skulls. The thylacoleo, faced with this furious 10-foot-tall defender, might reconsider their attack. The risk of injury is too high. They retreat back into the scrub, and the giant kangaroo lowers his arms, its direct gaze following them until they are gone. To the first humans, Procoptodon would have been a source of immense respect and fear. It was a potential source of food, to be sure, but it was not easy prey. Hunting one would have been a monumental undertaking. Imagine trying to get close to a creature with such excellent forward-facing vision and good hearing. It would see you coming from a long way off. And if you did manage to wound it, you would have to contend with its furious, powerful defense. A hunter, knocked to the ground, could be slashed to ribbons or crushed by a single powerful stomp. There are Aboriginal stories that may speak of these creatures, stories of giant, aggressive kangaroos, of killer kangaroos that were best avoided. It is easy to see how the memory of an animal like Procoptodon could be passed down through generations, its terrifying attributes becoming part of the mythological landscape. Consider the landscape itself. Procoptodon lived in a world with cliffs, ravines, and steep-sided gullies. A confrontation near such a feature could be deadly. A shove from one of these giants could send a person or a predator tumbling to their death. The giant short-faced kangaroo represents another theme of prehistoric Australia, the blurring of lines. It was an herbivore, but it had the weapons of a carnivore. It was a prey animal, but it could fight with the ferocity of a predator. It looked like a kangaroo, but it moved and behaved like something entirely different, something more akin to a giant bipedal bear. It challenges our comfortable categories. It reminds us that in this ancient world, survival required a different set of skills from everyone. The plant eaters had to be tough, aggressive, and ready for a fight. And Procoptodon, with its strange face, its boxer's stance, and its deadly claws, was perhaps the toughest of them all. To stand before it was to understand that even the grass-eaters were part of the nightmare.
Quincana, the terrestrial crocodile that ran after you. We have become accustomed to the dangers that lurk in the water. For millions of years, crocodiles have been the silent, lurking masters of the river's edge, the billabong, the swamp. Their strategy is one of patience, camouflage, and a sudden, explosive ambush from a liquid hiding place. Now, let us imagine a crocodile that has abandoned this strategy,
a crocodile that has left the water behind, a crocodile that does not wait for you to come to it, a crocodile that runs after you. This is the stuff of fever dreams, and this was the reality of Pleistocene Australia. Its name was Quincana. The name comes from the Quincans, spirits from the mythology of the Aboriginal people of Cape York in northern Australia. In these stories, Quincans are tall, thin, malevolent spirits that live in the rocks and cracks of the earth. It is a fittingly eerie name for a creature that haunted the dry land. To find Quincana, we must travel to the warmer, more tropical woodlands of the north. The air here is thick with humidity. The landscape is a mix of open forest and rugged, rocky escarpments, riddled with caves and fissures. This is Quincan country. We are not looking for it near the water. We are looking for it in the scrub, in the rocks, on the open plain. And there we see one. It is resting in the shade of a cluster of sandstone boulders, its body pressed against the cool rock. It looks like a crocodile, but it is wrong. Its snout is deep and broad, not flattened for moving through water. Its teeth, which are visible even when its mouth is closed, are not the conical piercing teeth of an aquatic crocodile. They are serrated, curved, and flattened from side to side, like the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus rex. These are teeth for slicing meat, not for gripping and drowning. But the most shocking difference is its legs. They are long, far longer and more powerful than any modern crocodile, and they are positioned more directly underneath its body. These are not the splayed, sprawling legs of a swimmer. These are the legs of a runner. Quincana was a terrestrial predator. It was a land crocodile. Some species were modest in size, perhaps 6 to 9 feet long, but the largest, Quincana fortirostrum, could reach lengths of up to 20 feet. It was a reptilian wolf, a creature that had taken the ancient successful body plan of a crocodilian and adapted it for a life on land. It could move with a surprising turn of speed, not a sustained marathon run, but a terrifyingly fast sprint. It could gallop. Imagine that, a 20-foot crocodile, its body held high off the ground, galloping across the savanna at a speed that a human could not outrun. Let us imagine its hunt. A group of wallabies is grazing peacefully in a clearing. They are wary, their ears twitching, their eyes scanning the tree line for marsupial lions. They are not looking for danger from a crocodile, not here, miles from the nearest river. The Quincana emerges from its hiding place among the rocks. It does not crawl on its belly. It rises up on its powerful legs and begins a charge. The wallabies see it, and panic erupts. They scatter, bounding away in all directions. The Quincana focuses on one. Its cold reptilian brain makes a simple calculation of speed and distance. It closes the gap with its galloping stride. The ground shakes with its footfalls. It lunges, its powerful jaws gaping wide. It does not need to drag its prey to water. Its bite is the killing blow. Those xiphodont teeth, those serrated blades, slice through flesh and sinew, causing massive, fatal trauma. The hunt is over in a matter of seconds. This was a predator that combined the ancient tenacity of a reptile with the hunting strategy of a mammalian pursuit predator. It was a walking, running anachronism, a creature that should not exist. For the first humans, Quincana would have represented a unique and horrifying threat. All their instincts about crocodiles would have been wrong. They would have learned to be cautious around water, but they would have assumed the dry land was safe from such creatures. They were wrong. A hunter walking through the bush might be stalked and chased down. A family seeking shelter in a rock overhang for the night might find that it was already the lair of a quincana. Its relatively slender body would have allowed it to squeeze into crevices and caves that a large megalania could not access. It was a silent stalker. It could lie in wait for hours, its body temperature dropping, its metabolism slowing to an almost imperceptible crawl. It could wait for you to walk past your hiding spot, and you would never know it was there until the moment its explosive charge began. The fear it inspired must have been profound. It was a monster that defied expectations. It blurred the line between land and water, between reptile and mammal, between the ancient world and the new. It was a living nightmare, a creature that came from the water but now owned the land. Its existence, alongside megalania, shows just how dominant reptiles were in this isolated continent. With no large placental carnivores to compete with, the reptiles were free to reclaim niches that had been lost to them in other parts of the world since the age of the dinosaurs. Australia was, in many ways, a second chance for the age of reptiles. And Quincana, the crocodile that ran you down on dry land, was one of its most terrifying success stories. It is a reminder that in this lost world, the monsters didn't always follow the rules. They created their own. And the first rule of Quincan country was simple: nowhere is safe.
Geniornis, the demon duck of doom. Let us now lift our gaze from the reptiles and marsupials that dominated the land and turn to the feathered inhabitants of this ancient continent. But do not picture graceful songbirds or soaring eagles. The birds we seek are of a different, more terrifying caliber. They were giants that had abandoned the sky to become masters of the ground. We find ourselves on a vast open floodplain, dotted with lakes and swamps. The air is thick with the buzz of insects and the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation. In the distance, a flock of large flightless birds is foraging near the water's edge. From far away, they might look like emus or ostriches. But as we get closer, their true bizarre nature becomes apparent. These are not graceful runners. They're heavy, ponderous, and powerful. These are Geniornis newtoni. Paleontologists have given this creature a nickname that is both amusing and chillingly accurate: the demon duck of doom. Let's study its form. A full-grown Geniornis stood over 7 feet tall and weighed around 500 pounds. It was a bird of immense bulk. Its legs were thick and powerful, ending in broad, heavy-toed feet. These were not the legs of a sprinter like an ostrich. They were the legs of a walker, a plodder, built for strength and endurance rather than speed. Its body was stout and barrel-chested, and from its body emerged a neck that was not overly long, but thick and muscular, supporting a truly strange head. The skull was tall and deep, but the most prominent feature was the beak.
It was a huge, cask-like structure that was taller than it was long. It was not a sharp-pointed beak of a carnivore, nor the delicate beak of a seed-eater. It was a powerful, blunt instrument, a crushing tool. What was this beak for? For a long time, scientists debated the diet of Genyornis. Was it a predator, a scavenger, an herbivore? The latest research suggests it was likely an opportunistic omnivore, a jack of all trades. It would have used that powerful beak to crush soft fruits and melons, but also to crack open large eggs stolen from other animals' nests. It may have scavenged from carcasses, using its beak to break bones to get at the marrow. And it is not a stretch to imagine it using that same beak to crush the skulls of smaller animals it managed to catch. The demon duck nickname comes from its evolutionary lineage. Genyornis belongs to a group of birds called the Dromonornithids, which are, believe it or not, most closely related to modern waterfowl, ducks, geese, and swans. Imagine the most ill-tempered moose you have ever encountered. Now scale it up to be taller than a man and weigh 500 pounds. Give it a beak designed for crushing. That is the temperament we are dealing with. Watch the flock. They move with a slow, deliberate purpose. They are social animals, communicating with deep, resonant honks that carry for miles across the floodplain. There is a clear social structure, a hierarchy. They are protective of their young and fiercely territorial. Let's imagine you are a human hunter trying to steal one of their eggs. The nests are simple scrapes on the ground, holding clutches of huge greenish-blue eggs, each one the size of a cantaloupe. A single egg could feed a family for days. The reward is high, but so is the risk. You wait until the parents have moved a short distance away to feed. You creep towards the nest, your heart pounding. You manage to grab an egg and you turn to flee. But one of the birds has seen you. It lets out a deafening, booming honk of alarm, and it begins to charge. This is not a graceful run. It is a thundering, earth-shaking advance. A 500-pound bird, its massive head lowered like a battering ram, its powerful legs eating up the ground between you. It is a living locomotive of feathers and fury. If it catches you, the consequences are dire. A kick from one of its powerful legs could break your ribs or your leg. A strike from that massive, crushing beak could shatter your arm or your skull. There is no fighting it. Your only hope is to run, to be faster, to find cover. The first humans and Genyornis shared this continent for at least 15,000 years, and there is direct evidence of their interaction. In ancient sand dunes, scientists have found fragments of Genyornis eggshells that have been burned. The burn patterns are not random like those from a wildfire. They show the signature of having been cooked in human campfires. This is a stunning piece of paleoarchaeology. It is a snapshot of a meal that took place 50,000 years ago. It tells a story of human ingenuity and daring. It confirms that our ancestors were actively hunting these giant birds, or at least raiding their nests. But this interaction may have been the beginning of the end for the demon duck. The systematic harvesting of their eggs, generation after generation, would have put immense pressure on their ability to reproduce. It's a classic example of how a small, intelligent predator can bring down a giant through a slow, patient war of attrition. As you watch the flock of Genyornis move across the plain, silhouetted against the setting sun, you see a vision of an Australia that is almost unrecognizable. A land where 7-foot-tall killer ducks roamed the landscape. They were a force of nature, a powerful and successful part of this ancient ecosystem for millions of years. They were not elegant, they were not graceful, but they were formidable. They were a reminder that in the evolutionary arms race of prehistoric Australia, even the relatives of the humble duck could evolve into monsters. The demon duck of doom was not a myth. It was a living, breathing, and terrifyingly real part of this lost world.
Dromornis, a 10-foot bird with axe-beak power. We thought we had seen the pinnacle of avian terror with Genyornis. We were wrong. The demon duck was merely the last of its kind. To find the true king of the thunderbirds, we must travel further back in time. Let us adjust the dial on our temporal journey, pushing back from the Pleistocene into the Miocene, around 8 million years ago. The world we enter is different. Australia is wetter, warmer, and more lush than the arid continent of 50,000 years ago. Vast subtropical rainforests cover much of the land. This is the world that gave birth to the largest bird that has ever lived. We are in a clearing in one of these ancient forests. The air is humid, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The sounds are of a vibrant, thriving ecosystem, but we are waiting for one sound in particular, a footstep that is heavier than any other. And then we see it, stepping out from the dense wall of greenery. It is a dromornithid, a relative of Genyornis, but it makes its descendant look like a dwarf. This is Dromornis stertoni. Let your mind try to grasp the scale of this creature. It stood 10 feet tall. That is higher than the ceiling in most modern houses. It could have looked an elephant in the eye. It weighed an estimated 1,300 pounds, more than half a ton. It was as heavy as a grand piano or a large polar bear. It was, by a significant margin, the most massive bird known to science. Its legs were like tree trunks, columns of bone and muscle designed to support its colossal weight. Its body was a gigantic feathered barrel. But it is the head and beak that truly command our attention and our fear. The skull alone was nearly 20 inches long, and the beak was immense, deep, and powerfully built. It was not sharp and pointed. It was like a massive, sharpened sledgehammer or a woodsman's felling axe. This was a beak designed for one thing, delivering incredible force. For many years, paleontologists assumed Dromornis was a gentle giant, a titanic herbivore, using its beak to crack tough nuts and seed pods. They nicknamed it Sturton's Thunderbird. But a closer look at its skull reveals a more sinister possibility. The skull shows evidence of massive muscle attachments for the jaw. The beak had a hooked tip, useful for tearing. And its skull was so robust, it seems over-engineered for a simple life of eating plants. Some scientists now argue that Dromornis was not a gentle herbivore. It was a predator, or at the very least, a highly aggressive omnivore that would not pass up a chance for a meal of flesh. Imagine this 10-foot-tall, half-ton bird, not as a giant goose, but as the avian equivalent of a Tyrannosaurus rex. It was the apex predator of its time and place. Let's reconstruct a hunt. A group of primitive, sheep-sized marsupials is browsing at the edge of the forest clearing. They're cautious, but the main predators they fear are reptilian, or early marsupial carnivores. They are not prepared for what is coming. The Dromornis has been watching them from the cover of the forest. It begins its charge. Despite its size, it could likely run at considerable speed, perhaps up to 30 miles per hour. It would have been a terrifying sight. A feathered avalanche, its huge head lowered, its massive beak ready. It closes the distance in seconds. It does not need to use its claws. It simply swings its head. The force of the impact from that axe-like beak would be catastrophic. A single powerful blow to the head or spine would kill its prey instantly. It could crush a skull as easily as we would crack a walnut.
Then it would use that same powerful beak to dismember the carcass, shearing through hide and breaking bones to get at the flesh. This was a bird that filled the ecological niche of a large carnivorous dinosaur. It was a testament to the fact that in the isolated world of Australia, evolution was free to experiment in ways that seem impossible to us. Even if Dromornis was primarily a herbivore, its temperament would have been a thing of terror. Like a modern cassowary or ostrich, but scaled up to monstrous proportions, it would have been fiercely territorial and suicidally brave in defense of its nest or its young. Imagine stumbling upon its nest. The eggs would have been the size of footballs, and the parent returning to find you there would not have given a warning. It would have attacked without hesitation. A kick from one of its legs would have the force of a speeding car. A blow from its beak would be instantly fatal. The very ground of this Miocene forest would have been shaped by them. Their massive feet would have churned the soil. Their feeding habits would have determined which plants could grow. They were the kings of this lost world. So why did they disappear? Why did the 10-foot-tall thunderbird give way to its smaller, 7-foot-tall descendant Genyornis? The answer, as is so often in Australia, is climate change. As the Miocene gave way to the Pliocene and Pleistocene, the continent continued its slow, relentless drying trend. The lush rainforest that Dromornis called home began to shrink, replaced by more open woodlands and grasslands. This changing environment may have been too much for such a specialized giant. Perhaps its food sources dwindled. Perhaps it was too large to adapt to the new, harsher conditions. It faded into extinction, leaving behind only its gigantic bones buried in the ancient lake beds of northern Australia. Bones that tell a story of a time when birds were the undisputed giants of the land. When we think of prehistoric monsters, our minds go to dinosaurs or giant mammals like the mammoth. We rarely think of birds, but Dromornis forces us to reconsider. It was a creature of such scale and power that it defies our expectations. It was a 10-foot-tall bird with the power of an axe, a true thunderbird that ruled a forgotten, greener Australia. And it is perhaps the most terrifying bird that has ever lived.
Thunderbirds in Aboriginal lore. The giants are gone. Dromornis and Genyornis no longer shake the ground with their footsteps. Their booming calls no longer echo across the floodplains. They vanished tens of thousands of years ago, swept away by the tides of climate change and the arrival of a new, intelligent predator. But did they vanish completely? Or did they leave an echo, a ghost, a memory, preserved not in stone, but in the oldest living stories on Earth? Let us explore the fascinating speculative bridge between the science of paleontology and the ancient art of oral tradition. Let us consider the possibility that Aboriginal lore may contain the last living record of Australia's giant birds. The first humans arrived in Australia at least 65,000 years ago. The last of the giant birds, Genyornis, disappeared around 45,000 to 50,000 years ago. This means that for a period of at least 15,000 years, a span of time 3 times longer than all of recorded human history from the Sumerians to today, humans and these megabirds coexisted. They shared the same landscape, drank from the same water holes, and undoubtedly came into conflict. An encounter with a 7-foot-tall, 500-pound demon duck would not be something you would easily forget. It would be a story worth telling. A story you would pass on to your children, and they to their children. A cautionary tale, a hunting epic, a part of the spiritual tapestry of the land. Across Australia, In many different Aboriginal cultures, there are stories of thunderbirds. These are not the thunderbirds of Native American lore associated with storms and lightning. These are giant, powerful birds, often described as giant emus or eagles that were forces to be reckoned with. In the traditions of some people of Central Australia, there are tales of a giant, hostile emu-like creature. It was said to be far larger than any modern emu with a fearsome temperament. It was a creature to be avoided, a monster from the dream time. Could this be a faded, distorted memory of Jenny Ornis? The details are tantalizing. Some stories describe these giant birds as living near water, which matches the floodplain habitat favored by Jenny Ornis. Some tales speak of their massive eggs, which we know from the fossil record were a target for human hunters. Consider the rock art. In Arnhem Land, in the far north of Australia, there is a rock painting that has been dated to be at least 40,000 years old. It depicts two giant bird-like figures, with what appear to be human figures nearby. The birds are depicted with features that are not quite like an emu's. They have stout bodies and thick necks. Some researchers have controversially suggested that this could be a direct, eyewitness depiction of Jenny Ornis. The painting is faded, its interpretation debated, but it sparks the imagination. Could we be looking at a piece of art created by someone who had seen these creatures with their own eyes? A postcard from the Pleistocene? Another fascinating piece of the puzzle comes from a different group of dromornithids. While Dromornis and Jenny Ornis were the giants, there were other, smaller species. One, Ilbondornis, was still larger than a modern ostrich, but was more gracefully built, more like a giant emu. It is possible that the giant emu stories refer to this creature, which may have survived longer. The connection becomes even more compelling when we look at the name some scientists gave to these birds, Mihirung. This is a word from the Topyurong people of Western Victoria. A Mihirung paring mol was a giant emu in their traditions. The paleontologists adopted this name, believing it to be a direct linguistic link to the extinct birds. While the directness of this link is now questioned by linguistics, the resonance remains powerful. Of course, we must be cautious. Mythology is not a scientific record. Stories evolve over time. They are layered with metaphor, symbolism, and spiritual meaning. A giant monster in a story can represent many things: a natural disaster, a social taboo, a spiritual force. To simply say, this myth equals this fossil, is an oversimplification. But the alternative is to assume that two completely separate systems of knowledge, Western paleontology, based on bones, and Aboriginal oral tradition, based on millennia of observation, arrived at the description of a giant emu-like bird by sheer coincidence. This seems unlikely. It is more probable that these stories are what some call shadows or echoes of the megafauna. The biological reality of the creature has faded, but its cultural and emotional impact remains, fossilized in story. The terror of a charging Jenny Ornis, the awe of its size, the value of its eggs. These are powerful emotional anchors that could keep a story alive for tens of thousands of years. Imagine a group of early humans huddled around a fire 50,000 years ago. An elder is telling a story to the children. He's not using complex scientific names. He's using the language of his people. He speaks of the giant bird that lives by the great swamp. He imitates its deep, honking call. He mimes its thundering charge. He warns the children never to go near its nest alone.
That story, in some form, is told again the next night and the next generation. It is passed down a chain of human memory that stretches across an almost unimaginable gulf of time. The details may change. The name of the bird may evolve. Its meaning within the culture may shift, but the core of the story, the memory of a giant bird that once stalked this land, persists. So when we hear the tales of the mihirung or the giant emus of the dream time, perhaps we are not just listening to myth. Perhaps we are listening to the last faint whispers of the dromornithids. We are hearing a ghost story, 50,000 years in the telling. A story that connects the people of today to the vanished, nightmarish, and wonderful world of the Australian megafauna.
Eggs bigger than your head. Let us pause our survey of the great beasts and focus on a single humble object, an object of profound vulnerability and of immense potential, an object that represented both a great prize and a terrible risk. We are going to contemplate the egg. In the world of prehistoric Australia, the egg was a currency of life and death. For the creatures that laid them, they were the future of their species, a precious cargo to be guarded at all costs. For the predators and scavengers, including the first humans, they were a perfect package of protein and fat, a bounty worth fighting for. Let's imagine you are on a gathering expedition. You are not hunting for large game today. You are searching for roots, grubs, and anything else the land might offer. You are moving through a low, scrubby woodland that opens onto a wide, grassy plain. And then you see it. In a shallow scrape in the sandy soil, nestled in a ring of dried grass and twigs, is a clutch of eggs. But these are unlike any eggs you have ever seen. There are perhaps a dozen of them. Each one is enormous, the size of a melon, with a thick, greenish-blue shell that is rough to the touch. They're beautiful, in a strange, alien way. You have stumbled upon the nest of a geniornis. You freeze. Your first instinct is one of exhilaration. This is a treasure trove. A single one of these eggs contains the nutritional equivalent of dozens of chicken eggs. This nest represents a feast for your entire clan. It means security. It means full bellies. It means life. Your second instinct is terror. You scan the horizon, your heart hammering in your chest. Where are the parents? A geniornis flock is grazing in the distance, perhaps a quarter of a mile away. They seem preoccupied, but how long will they stay there? How quickly can a 500-pound bird cover that distance? The nest is a trap, baited with the promise of food. To approach it is to step into a circle of danger. You must make a choice, and you must make it quickly. Do you risk it? You are alone. You cannot carry all of them. Perhaps you can snatch one, just one, and be gone before you are noticed. You creep forward, your movements slow and deliberate. Your body low to the ground. Every snap of a twig under your foot sounds like a thunderclap. The air is still. You reach the nest. The eggs are warm to the touch. The parents have not been gone long. You select one, cradling its immense weight in your arms. It is heavier than you expected. You begin to retreat, moving backwards, never taking your eyes off the distant flock. And then one of the giant birds lifts its head. It has seen you. A deep, booming alarm call echoes across the plain. It is a sound that chills you to the bone.
the entire flock turns, and then two of them, the nesting pair, begin to run. It is a sight of pure adrenaline-fueled horror. Two 7-foot-tall birds charging at you, their powerful legs churning, their massive heads lowered. You are no longer a gatherer. You are prey. You turn and run for your life, the heavy egg clutched to your chest. Your only hope is the tree line, the cover of the forest. Can you make it? The thudding of their footsteps grows louder, closer. It is a race. You can possibly win. This scenario, or something like it, must have played out countless times. Sometimes the human would win, bringing a vital source of food back to their camp. Other times, the bird would win, and the hunter would be trampled into the dust, a cautionary tale for their clan. And it was not just Geniornis eggs that were on the menu. The reptilian giants also laid eggs. Imagine discovering the nest of a megalania, a pit dug in the warm earth filled with dozens of leathery, oblong eggs. The mother lizard would not be a distant, charging threat. She would be a silent, camouflaged guardian, perhaps buried in the soil nearby, waiting with infinite patience for any creature foolish enough to disturb her clutch. To raid her nest would be to risk a venomous bite, a slow and certain death. Even the crocodiles of the land, the quinquina, would have laid eggs in terrestrial nests, guarding them with a reptile's cold fury. The first humans became master egg thieves. They had to. It was a crucial survival strategy. They would have learned to read the signs, to know the nesting seasons. They would have developed strategies for raiding nests, using fire to drive parents away or creating a diversion while a swift runner snatched the prize. The evidence for this is written in the earth. The discovery of those 50,000-year-old cooked Geniornis eggshells is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a testament to the courage and ingenuity of these people. It is a fossilized meal that tells a story of incredible risk and reward. But this relentless pressure had a profound ecological impact. By consistently harvesting the eggs of the great birds, humans were striking at the most vulnerable point in their life cycle. A giant bird can defend itself. Its egg cannot. Over thousands of years, this systematic predation could have driven the great birds to extinction without ever needing to hunt a single adult. It was a slow, quiet apocalypse, one stolen egg at a time. So as we contemplate this giant, beautiful egg, let us see it for what it is. It is a symbol of the fragile balance of this ancient world. It is a source of life, a promise of a future generation. It is a meal, a treasure, a temptation, and it is a weapon used by a small, intelligent ape to slowly, methodically erase the thunderbirds from the face of the earth. It is an object of profound and terrible power.
Feathers, claws, and fury. Sound of a mix of avian calls, a sharp shriek, a low hiss, and the rustle of large wings that cannot fly. We have met the giants. We have seen their power and their scale. Now, let us try to understand their minds. Let us zoom in past the statistics of their height and weight and observe the quiet, terrifying details of their behavior. What was it like to share a world with birds that thought like dinosaurs? The first thing to understand is that the avian brain, while different from our own, is a tool of remarkable complexity. Modern birds, from the cunning corvid to the fierce cassowary, display intelligence, problem-solving, and a rich emotional life. The giant birds of prehistoric Australia would have been no different.
Their fury was not mindless, it was calculated. Their behavior was not random, it was driven by ancient, powerful instincts. Let us observe a cassowary in a modern rainforest. It is a living link to the megabirds of the past. Watch its eyes. They are sharp, intelligent, and constantly assessing its surroundings. It misses nothing. It moves with a deliberate, reptilian grace. It is a creature that seems to be constantly making decisions, weighing risks, and asserting its dominance. Now, amplify this. Imagine this level of intelligence and intensity in a bird the size of a dromaenormous, 10 feet tall and half a ton. Let's focus on the concept of territory. For a large, aggressive bird, territory is everything. It is a source of food, a place to nest, a kingdom to be ruled. The boundaries of this territory would have been invisible to a human, but they would have been rigidly defined and ferociously defended by the bird. Imagine a human clan traveling through the bush. You are not seeking a confrontation. You are simply trying to get from one place to another. Unknowingly, you cross one of these invisible lines. You have trespassed into the domain of a geniornous pair. The first warning would be a change in the bird's posture. From a distance, you see it stop foraging. Its head goes up. It stares directly at you. It is a fixed, unblinking stare that is deeply unnerving. It is assessing you. Are you a threat? Are you prey? Are you competition? Then comes the threat display. It is a piece of theater designed to intimidate, to make you leave without a fight. The bird might fluff up its feathers, making itself seem even larger than it already is. It might begin to sway its head from side to side, a hypnotic, menacing movement, and it will begin to vocalize. The sound would be a low, guttural hiss that seems to emanate from the very earth, a deep, vibrating rumble that is felt as much as it is heard. It is a primal sound of aggression, a clear and unambiguous message. This is my land. Go now. If the display doesn't work, if you are slow to react or fail to understand the warning, the behavior escalates. The hissing gives way to a full-throated booming call, and then the charge. But let's consider a quieter, more unsettling behavior. These birds, like many modern birds, were likely curious, and a large, intelligent, and fearless creature's curiosity can be terrifying. Imagine you have made camp for the night. You are exhausted. You have posted a watch, but after a long day, attention can wander. A geniornous, its territory bordering your campsite, might investigate. It would not charge in. It would approach slowly, silently, its large feet making surprisingly little sound on the soft earth. It would stand at the very edge of the firelight, a towering dark silhouette against the moonless sky. It would just watch. Its head would be tilted, its dark eye fixing on the strange flickering light of the fire, on the sleeping forms of the humans. What is it thinking? Is it trying to understand these strange new creatures? Is it waiting for an opportunity? Is it simply satisfying a deep avian curiosity? The physiological effect of being watched by such a creature would be immense. To wake in the night and see that solent giant shape standing just beyond the reach of the flames would be an experience of pure primal fear. And then there are the claws. We often focus on the beaks of these birds, the crushing power of Geniornis or the axe-like force of Dromoenormus, but we should not forget their feet. Like a modern emu or cassowary, their powerful legs could deliver devastating kicks. The claws on their toes were not just for grip, they were weapons. A downward slash from the foot of a large Dromornithid could disembowel a man. They would have used these kicks in fights with each other, over mates or territory, and they would certainly have used them in defense against predators like Thyleocaleo or against the new spear-bearing apes that had entered their world. The fury of these birds was not just a reaction to a direct threat. It was a fundamental part of their being. It was the key to their survival in a land of monsters. They were not gentle herbivores. They were feathered brawlers, bullies, and killers. Their behavior was a complex tapestry of intelligence, instinct, aggression, and even curiosity. They were not simple mindless brutes. They were complex animals, the products of millions of years of evolution in a harsh and competitive world. To live alongside them was to live with a constant, unpredictable threat, a threat that could be triggered by a single accidental step over an invisible line, a threat that could watch you silently from the darkness, a threat that could explode in a whirlwind of feathers, claws, and fury, ending your life in a terrifying, brutal instant. Understanding their behavior was not an academic exercise. It was the key to staying alive.
Deserts that swallowed you. The sound of a vast, howling wind and the fine grit of sand. We have spent much of our journey in the shadow of giants, focusing on the living creatures that made prehistoric Australia a place of nightmares. But now we must turn our attention to a different kind of monster. A predator that was larger, more patient, and more powerful than any flesh and blood beast. We must now face the land itself. Let us travel to the heart of the continent, the Red Center. A vast, empty space that even today is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. 50,000 years ago, during the grip of the last ice age, it was even more extreme. This was a desert that did not just challenge you, it actively tried to kill you. Imagine standing in the middle of this ancient desert. The horizon is a flat, unbroken line in every direction, shimmering under a merciless sun. The ground is not soft sand, but a hard, sun-baked pavement of red clay and sharp stones, known as a gibber plain. The heat is a physical presence, a heavy blanket that smothers you, draining the moisture from your body with every breath. There is no shade. The few pathetic skeletal shrubs that cling to life here offer no respite. There is no water. The air is so dry that it cracks your lips and stings your eyes. The silence is absolute, a crushing, profound emptiness that can unravel the mind. To be lost here was to be erased. The sun was the first hunter. It beat down relentlessly, day after day. Without water, a human would succumb to dehydration in a matter of hours. The first stage is a desperate, maddening thirst. Then comes weakness, confusion, delirium. Your body, struggling to conserve its last precious moisture, stops sweating. Your core temperature soars. The world dissolves into a hallucinatory, shimmering nightmare before you finally collapse, your life scoured from you by the sheer intensity of the light. But the desert had other weapons. The wind was a restless, malevolent spirit. It could be a constant, hot breath that sapped your will to live, or it could rise with terrifying speed into a sandstorm. Imagine seeing it coming, a dark wall on the horizon rising from the earth to meet the sky, a churning, boiling cloud of red dust. The wind picks up, howling in your ears. The air grows thick, choking. Then it hits you. It is like being sandblasted, a maelstrom of fine, sharp particles that get into your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your lungs. The world vanishes. Visibility drops to zero. The sun is blotted out. You are in a roaring red darkness. The noise is deafening. The only thing to do is to huddle on the ground, cover your head, and pray for it to pass. These storms could last for hours, burying landmarks, filling in water soaks, and leaving you utterly disoriented in a rearranged world. And the desert could drown you. It seems impossible in such a dry place, but the arid lands of Australia are prone to flash floods.
For months, even years, a riverbed might be nothing more than a dry, sandy highway, a convenient path for travel. But far away, hundreds of miles upstream, a localized thunderstorm could dump a massive amount of rain. That water, with nowhere to soak into the hard-baked earth, would gather and surge down the dry river channel. It would not be a gentle rising of the waters. It would be a wall of brown, churning water, filled with rocks and uprooted trees, moving at the speed of a running horse. You would hear it before you saw it, a low, distant roar that grew louder and louder. If you were camped in that dry riverbed, you would have only minutes to scramble to high ground. If you were not fast enough, the flood would swallow you whole, a sudden, violent death in the heart of a drought-stricken land. The temperature itself was a weapon. The days were hellishly hot, but the nights could be deceptively lethally cold. The clear, dry air could not hold the day's heat, and temperatures could plummet below freezing. To be caught out at night without fire or shelter was to risk dying of hypothermia, your body slowly shutting down in the frigid, starlit darkness. And the land played tricks on your mind. The endless, featureless landscape could induce a profound sense of agoraphobia and despair. The shimmering heat created mirages, illusions of lakes and trees that would lure a thirsty, desperate person to their doom, chasing a promise of water that was never there. Survival here required a level of knowledge and resilience that is almost beyond our comprehension. The first peoples who crossed these deserts were not just walking. They were reading a subtle, secret language written on the face of the land. They knew how to find water by following the flight paths of certain birds, or by digging in the sand at the base of a particular type of tree. They knew how to get moisture from the roots of plants, or even from the bodies of desert frogs that would entome themselves in mucus-lined burrows waiting for the rain. They carried a mental map of this vast emptiness in their heads, a map passed down through generations, encoded in songs and stories. This rock formation meant water was near. This alignment of stars guided you to the next soak. They navigated a land that looks like a void to us, because they saw the signs that we are blind to. To them, the desert was not empty. It was full of meaning, full of stories, full of life, if you knew how to look. But it was also an unforgiving and terrible hunter. It swallowed the careless, the unprepared, and the unlucky without a trace. It was a monster of heat and dust and distance, and its hunting grounds were the very soul of the continent.
Forests full of traps. Let us leave the stark, open horror of the desert and retreat into the seeming sanctuary of the forest. Here, at least, there is shade from the brutal sun. There is a sense of enclosure, of life, of moisture in the air. The forest feels like a refuge. But this, too, is an illusion. The ancient forests of Australia were just as dangerous as the deserts, but their traps were quieter, more insidious, and far more cunning. We find ourselves in a different kind of forest from the dry eucalyptus-dominated woodlands we have seen before. This is a remnant of an older Australia, a pocket of dense, wet rainforest clinging to the slopes of a mountain range. The air is cool and damp, thick with the smell of wet earth, decaying leaves, and sweet blooming orchids. Giant tree ferns, survivors from the age of dinosaurs, form a lush understory. The canopy is a thick, impenetrable ceiling of green, and the light that filters through is dim and ethereal. Soft green moss carpets the ground, the rocks, and the trunks of the trees. It is a place of breathtaking primeval beauty, and it is full of traps. The very ground beneath your feet is not to be trusted. That soft, inviting carpet of moss can hide a multitude of dangers.
It can grow over a network of tangled roots ready to trip you and send you crashing to the forest floor. A fall here could mean a broken bone, a death sentence in this world. But the moss can hide something far worse. It can conceal the entrance to a sinkhole. These forests often grew on limestone or karst landscapes. Over thousands of years, water had dissolved the rock from below, creating a hidden network of underground caves, chasms, and rivers. Sometimes, the roof of one of these caverns would collapse, creating a deep vertical shaft to the darkness below. These sinkholes, their edges softened and hidden by the lush growth, were perfect natural traps. Imagine walking through the dim forest light. You take a step, expecting to feel the solid earth beneath your foot. Instead, there is nothing. Just a heart-stopping moment of weightlessness before you plummet into the cold, silent dark. Fossil sites like the Victoria Fossil Cave at Naracoorte are a testament to this danger. For 500,000 years, this hidden sinkhole acted as a pitfall trap, collecting the bones of countless animals that wandered too close. We find the skeletons of Thylacoleo, of giant kangaroos, of Diprotodon, all jumbled together, a permanent record of their final, fatal misstep. A human who fell into such a trap would have no hope of escape, doomed to a slow death from injury or starvation in the subterranean darkness. The plants themselves were a trap. While beautiful, many of them were armed. The lawyer vine, or wait a while, is a climbing palm armed with vicious backward-facing hooks. To brush against it is to become entangled. To struggle is to become more deeply ensnared, its barbs tearing at your skin and clothes. To be caught in a thicket of it was to be held fast, a prisoner of the forest. And then there was the stinging tree, Dendrocrinide moroides. This innocent-looking shrub, with its large heart-shaped leaves, is one of the most venomous plants in the world. Its leaves and stems are covered in tiny silica-tipped hairs that act like hypodermic needles. The slightest touch injects a potent neurotoxin. The pain is described as being like fire and acid, and it is immediate and excruciating. But the true horror of the stinging tree is its persistence. The pain can last for days, even weeks, and can be re-triggered months later by a simple touch or a change in temperature. A severe sting could be debilitating, leaving a person screaming in agony, unable to function. In this world, to be incapacitated was to be vulnerable, an easy meal for any predator that happened upon you. The very shadows of the forest were a trap. They provided perfect cover for ambush predators. A Thylacoleo could be perched on a branch just above your head, its dappled coat blending perfectly with the leaves. A quincana could be lying motionless in a deep patch of shade, looking like a fallen log. The dim, shifting light played tricks on the eyes, making it impossible to be certain of what was a threat and what was just a part of the landscape. The silence of the forest was also deceptive. It was a silence that could be broken at any moment by a sudden, violent attack. You would walk in a state of constant heightened awareness, your ears straining to catch the snap of a twig, the rustle of a leaf that sounded out of place. It was a psychologically draining way to live. Even the water in the forest could not be trusted. A clear, bubbling stream might seem safe, but it could be home to leeches, or worse, contaminated with bacteria from a carcass decaying upstream. The forest, with its lush beauty and promise of shelter, was a labyrinth of hidden dangers. It was a world where a wrong step could send you into the abyss, a casual touch could lead to weeks of agony, and the shadows themselves could kill you. It was a more subtle hunter than the open desert, but it was no less deadly. It was a green, silent, and beautiful trap.
The waterholes of death. Water is the thread that connects all life. In a continent as dry as Australia, this thread is stretched thin.
and the places where it pools on the surface are the most vital and contested locations in the entire ecosystem. The waterhole, the billabong, the river. These were the centers of life, and because of that, they were the epicenters of death. Let us find a place to observe one of these ancient waterholes. It is the end of a long, dry season. The pool of water is small and shrinking, its edges a cracked mud tapestry of 1,000 footprints. The water that remains is a murky greenish-brown soup, thick with algae and life. The air is heavy with the smell of mud, wet decay, and the metallic tang of fear. This is the only water for miles around. Every living creature must eventually come here to drink. The herbivores, the predators, the birds, the first humans. It is the great unavoidable meeting place, and the rules of engagement are written in blood. The waterhole is a natural amphitheater for predation. The very act of drinking makes an animal vulnerable. To lower its head to the water is to break its line of sight, to expose its mech, to be distracted for a precious few seconds, and in this world, a few seconds was all a predator needed. Let us watch the scene unfold as if it were a slow, silent play. A herd of Protemnodon, the giant wallabies, approaches the waterhole. They do not rush in. They are nervous. They stop at the edge of the clearing, their heads up, their noses twitching, their large ears swiveling, sampling the air for any hint of danger. They stand there for a long time, frozen in a state of high alert. This is the first act, the assessment of risk. Satisfied for the moment that the immediate vicinity is clear, they move forward cautiously, but their eyes are still scanning the surrounding landscape. What are they looking for? They are looking for the motionless log at the water's edge, the log that has two cold reptilian eyes just breaking the surface. This is Palimnarchus, a giant freshwater crocodile, larger and more robust than its modern counterparts. It has been waiting, perfectly still, for hours. Its metabolism is so slow it can wait for days for the perfect opportunity. Its entire being is focused on this one moment. The wallabies are also scanning the trees that overlook the waterhole. They are looking for the out-of-place shape, the patch of tawny fur in the fork of a branch, the thylacalo, the marsupial lion. From its high vantage point, it has a perfect view of the entire scene. It, too, is waiting, a coiled spring of muscle and patience. And on the far side of the waterhole, stretched out on a sun-drenched patch of rock, is the master of patience himself, the megalania. It is so still it seems to be part of the rock, but its forked tongue flicks out, tasting the scent of the approaching wallabies. It knows it does not need to move yet. Time is on its side. The wallabies, seeing no immediate threat, finally commit. A few of them move to the water's edge and begin to drink, their heads low. The other members of the herd stand guard, a 360-degree perimeter of nervous vigilance. This is the moment. The tension is unbearable. Which predator will strike? The log in the water explodes. In a surge of spray and reptilian fury, the Palimnarchus lunges, its immense jaws closing on the head of a drinking wallaby. There is a sickening crunch, and the crocodile drags its victim into the murky depths. Its job done. The water froths and turns red, then is still again. The remaining wallabies panic, exploding away from the waterhole. But their panic is another predator's opportunity. As they bound blindly away from the water, they run directly under the tree where the thylacalo is perched. It drops silently onto the back of one of the fleeing animals, and the kill is swift and silent. The waterhole has claimed 2 victims in less than a minute.
For the first humans, navigating this gauntlet of death was a daily challenge. You could not avoid the waterholes. Your life depended on them. But to approach one was to consciously enter the deadliest place for hundreds of square miles. Human strategy would have been based on intelligence and cooperation. You wouldn't just wander in. You would observe, perhaps for hours, from a safe distance. You would read the signs, the behavior of the birds, the freshness of the tracks in the mud, the unnatural silence that often precedes an ambush. You might use fire, creating smoke to drive away insects and perhaps reveal a hidden predator. Or you would use numbers, approaching as a large, noisy group to intimidate any lurking threats. You would post sentries, facing outwards, while a few members of the clan quickly filled water skins. The goal was to get in, get the water, and get out as quickly and efficiently as possible. There was no lingering, there was no relaxing. The waterhole was also a place of opportunity for human hunters. It was the one place you knew your prey had to come. A hunting party could set up its own ambush, waiting for a herd of kangaroos to come down to drink. But in doing so, you were competing directly with the other larger predators. You were inserting yourself into a deadly and complex game of chess, where a single wrong move meant you were no longer the hunter, but the hunted. The waterhole was a paradox. It was the source of all life, and the stage for constant, brutal death. It was a place of immense tension and fear, but also of a strange, savage beauty. It was the heart of the Australian Pleistocene, and its waters were stained with the blood of an entire lost ecosystem.
The sky wasn't safe, either. We have explored the dangers that stalked the ground, that lurked in the water, and that hid in the shadows of the forest. We have considered the giant flightless birds that ruled the plains. But we have, until now, largely ignored the vertical dimension. We have forgotten to look up. And in prehistoric Australia, that was a grave mistake. The sky was not an empty space. It was a hunting ground. Let us find ourselves on a high cliff edge, overlooking a vast wooded valley. The wind is strong here, an updraft that eagles would use to soar for hours without effort. And it is an eagle we are looking for, but one of a scale and power that beggars belief. A shadow passes over us, vast and swift. We look up, and there it is, circling on the wind. This is Host's eagle. Now, technically, this incredible bird was the apex predator of neighboring New Zealand, not mainland Australia. But it is such a perfect example of avian gigantism in the region that we must consider it. And Australia had its own, only slightly smaller, giant eagle, Dinatoetus gaffa. Let's focus on this Australian giant. Dinatoetus was a massive bird of prey. It was not as heavy as Host's eagle, but it was still a formidable predator, with a wingspan that could have exceeded 10 feet. Its feet and talons were huge, far larger and more powerful than those of a modern wedge-tailed eagle. They were comparable in size to the talons of a large primate's hands. These were not talons for snatching rabbits. These were talons for killing large prey. Its primary targets would have been the young of the giant marsupials, a juvenile kangaroo, a koala, even perhaps a very young diprotodon. It would have hunted from a great height, its incredible eyesight picking out a target from miles away. Imagine being a young, lone kangaroo, separated from your mob. You are grazing peacefully. You have no idea that thousands of feet above you, a pair of the sharpest eyes in the nature is fixed on you. The eagle folds its wings and begins to dive. It is a controlled stoop, a feathered missile dropping out of the sky at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. The sound of its approach would be a terrifying, accelerating roar of wind. The impact would be devastating. The eagle would strike with its massive clenched talons, a blow with the force of a concrete block dropped from a great height. It was enough to kill its prey outright, or at least stun it and knock it to the ground. Then those talons would open, sinking deep into the flesh, the claws puncturing vital organs. Now, place a human in this scenario, not a strong adult hunter, but a child playing at the edge of the camp, distracted, unaware. To a giant eagle, that child would look no different from any other small, soft-skinned mammal. It would be a perfectly viable target. Aboriginal stories from across Australia contain tales of giant eagles, creatures capable of carrying away children or even adults. For a long time, these were dismissed as myth, as campfire stories to scare children into staying close to home. But the discovery of fossils like Dinatowedus gaffa forces us to reconsider. Perhaps these were not myths. Perhaps they were memories. A memory of a time when the sky itself was a source of terror, when a shadow passing overhead could mean a sudden, violent death from above. The threat from the sky was not just from eagles. There were other, stranger hunters. The Pleistocene skies were home to giant owls, larger and more powerful than any species alive today. These were the nocturnal equivalent of the eagles, silent hunters of the night. Imagine your clan asleep around a dying fire. A giant, powerful owl, Tyto gigantea, glides on silent fringed wings through the darkness. It is a ghost, a phantom. It is hunting for possums, gliders, or any other nocturnal marsupial. But its eyes are sharp. It sees a sleeping infant, wrapped in skins but still exposed. It is a target of opportunity. The attack would be utterly silent. A faint whisper of air, and then the grip of powerful talons. The child would be snatched from its sleep, lifted into the darkness before anyone even knew what had happened. The only sound would be the cry of the infant, already fading as the owl carried it away to its roost. The sky was a constant three-dimensional threat. It required a different kind of vigilance. You would have to learn to read the sky as carefully as you read the ground. You would learn to recognize the silhouette of the giant eagle. You would know to seek cover when it was circling. The children would be taught from the moment they could walk to fear the open sky. Even the weather in the sky was a predator. We have spoken of the storms in the desert, but in the tropical north, the thunderstorms were of a different magnitude. They were violent, electric affairs, with lightning that could split giant trees and start massive wildfires. A lightning strike was a random, terrifying act of God, a bolt from the blue that could kill you instantly. The sky was not a symbol of freedom or escape. It was the ceiling of your prison, and it was patrolled by monsters. It was a constant reminder that no matter where you stood, no matter how well you defended yourself from the dangers on the ground, you were never truly safe. The threat could always come from above, swift, silent, and final. The sky wasn't safe either. We have explored the dangers that stalked the ground, that lurked in the water, and that hid in the shadows of the forest. We have considered the giant flightless birds that ruled the plains. But we have, until now, largely ignored the vertical dimension. We have forgotten to look up. And in prehistoric Australia, that was a grave mistake. The sky was not an empty space. It was a hunting ground. Let us find ourselves on a high cliff edge, overlooking a vast wooded valley. The wind is strong here, an updraft that eagles would use to soar for hours without effort. And it is an eagle we are looking for, but one of a scale and power that beggars belief. A shadow passes over us, vast and swift. We look up, and there it is, circling on the wind. This is Host's eagle. Now, technically, This incredible bird was the apex predator of neighboring New Zealand, not mainland Australia. But it is such a perfect example of avian gigantism in the region that we must consider it. And Australia had its own, only slightly smaller, giant eagle, Dinatoetus gaffa. Let's focus on this Australian giant. Dinatoetus was a massive bird of prey. It was not as heavy as Haast's eagle, but it was still a formidable predator, with a wingspan that could have exceeded 10 feet. Its feet and talons were huge, far larger and more powerful than those of a modern wedge-tailed eagle. They were comparable in size to the talons of a large primate's hands. These were not talons for snatching rabbits. These were talons for killing large prey. Its primary targets would have been the young of the giant marsupials, a juvenile kangaroo, a koala, even perhaps a very young diprotodon. It would have hunted from a great height, its incredible eyesight picking out a target from miles away. Imagine being a young, lone kangaroo, separated from your mob. You are grazing peacefully. You have no idea that thousands of feet above you, a pair of the sharpest eyes in the nature is fixed on you. The eagle folds its wings and begins to dive. It is a controlled stoop, a feathered missile dropping out of the sky at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. The sound of its approach would be a terrifying, accelerating roar of wind. The impact would be devastating. The eagle would strike with its massive clenched talons, a blow with the force of a concrete block dropped from a great height. It was enough to kill its prey outright, or at least stun it and knock it to the ground. Then those talons would open, sinking deep into the flesh, the claws puncturing vital organs. Now place a human in this scenario, not a strong adult hunter, but a child playing at the edge of the camp, distracted, unaware. To a giant eagle, that child would look no different from any other small, soft-skinned mammal. It would be a perfectly viable target. Aboriginal stories from across Australia contain tales of giant eagles, creatures capable of carrying away children or even adults. For a long time, these were dismissed as myth, as campfire stories to scare children into staying close to home. But the discovery of fossils like Dinatoetus gaffa forces us to reconsider. Perhaps these were not myths. Perhaps they were memories. A memory of a time when the sky itself was a source of terror, when a shadow passing overhead could mean a sudden, violent death from above. The threat from the sky was not just from eagles. There were other, stranger hunters. The Pleistocene skies were home to giant owls, larger and more powerful than any species alive today. These were the nocturnal equivalent of the eagles, silent hunters of the night. Imagine your clan asleep around a dying fire. A giant, powerful owl, Tyto gigantea, glides on silent fringed wings through the darkness. It is a ghost, a phantom. It is hunting for possums, gliders, or any other nocturnal marsupial. But its eyes are sharp. It sees a sleeping infant, wrapped in skins but still exposed. It is a target of opportunity. The attack would be utterly silent. A faint whisper of air, and then the grip of powerful talons. The child would be snatched from its sleep, lifted into the darkness before anyone even knew what had happened. The only sound would be the cry of the infant, already fading as the owl carried it away to its roost. The sky was a constant three-dimensional threat. It required a different kind of vigilance. You would have to learn to read the sky as carefully as you read the ground. You would learn to recognize the silhouette of the giant eagle. You would know to seek cover when it was circling. The children would be taught from the moment they could walk to fear the open sky. Even the weather in the sky was a predator. We have spoken of the storms in the desert, but in the tropical north, the thunderstorms were of a different magnitude. They were violent, electric affairs with lightning that could split giant trees and start massive wildfires. A lightning strike was a random, terrifying act of God, a bolt from the blue that could kill you instantly. The sky was not a symbol of freedom or escape. It was the ceiling of your prison, and it was patrolled by monsters. It was a constant reminder that no matter where you stood, no matter how well you defended yourself from the dangers on the ground, you were never truly safe. The threat could always come from above, swift, silent, and final.
The great dying of the megafauna. There is a deep silence that has fallen over our journey. The thunderous footsteps of the Diprotodon have ceased. The booming call of the Geniornis no longer echoes across the plains. The shadow of the Thylacoleo no longer slips through the trees. The giants are gone. We now enter the final act of this prehistoric drama, an act of profound and mysterious loss. We are witnesses to an extinction event, a great dying that forever changed the face of the Australian continent, leaving it a quieter, smaller, and less terrifying place. This was not a sudden, cataclysmic event like the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. This was a slow, creeping apocalypse, one that unfolded over thousands of years. It was a silent unraveling of an ecosystem that had been stable for millions of years. Let us stand on a metaphorical hill and watch this long, slow tragedy unfold. The time is roughly 50,000 to 40,000 years ago. The players are in place. The megafauna, in all their terrifying glory, are still dominating the landscape. The first humans have arrived and are beginning to spread across the continent. And the climate is beginning to change. These three factors, the beasts, the people, and the climate, are the key suspects in this great mystery. The Great Dying was not a simple murder. It was a complex case with multiple culprits, each pointing the finger at the other. Let's first consider the changing climate. The world was in the grip of the last ice age, but this was not a period of stable, constant cold. It was a time of wild, dramatic climate swings. Periods of relative warmth and wetness would give way to intense, prolonged droughts. As we look out over our imaginary landscape, we see the effects. The great inland lakes, like Lake Eyre, which were once vast bodies of fresh water, begin to shrink. The water becomes saline, then disappears altogether, leaving behind a cracked, salt-encrusted wasteland. The lush woodlands and floodplains that supported giants like Geniornis and Diprotodon begin to wither. They are replaced by the hard, unforgiving scrub and desert that we associate with modern Australia. This process is called aridification, the drying of the continent. For the megafauna, this was a catastrophe. They were specialists adapted to a world of abundant water and lush vegetation. A 3-ton Diprotodon needed a huge amount of food and water every day to survive. As its food sources disappeared, its massive body became a liability, not an asset. It was a gas-guzzling engine in a world that was running out of fuel. We can see the evidence of this struggle in the fossil record. The great graveyards of megafauna, like the one at Lake Callabona, show hundreds of animals congregating at the last dying water sources, becoming trapped in the mud as they made a final, desperate attempt to drink. It was a slow, agonizing death by thirst and starvation, brought on by a climate that was pulling the rug out from under their feet. Now, let's introduce the second factor, fire. Fire has always been a natural part of the Australian landscape. Lightning strikes would have sparked wildfires for millions of years, but the arrival of humans brought a new kind of fire, a controlled, systematic fire.
The first peoples learned to use fire as a tool. They practiced what is now called fire stick farming. They would intentionally burn patches of the landscape. This had many benefits. It cleared away the dense, impassable undergrowth, making it easier to travel. It flushed out game, making hunting easier. And it stimulated the growth of new green shoots, which would attract herbivores to the area. But this new fire regime had a profound and transformative effect on the landscape. Over thousands of years, it began to change the very composition of the forests. The fire-sensitive plants of the older, wetter forests could not survive. They were replaced by the fire-loving, hard-leaved plants that dominate Australia today, like eucalyptus and acacia. For the megafauna, this was another devastating blow. The specialist browsers, who relied on the soft, diverse vegetation of the old-growth forests, found their food supply being replaced by tough, low-nutrient eucalyptus leaves. They were being starved out, their habitat systematically altered by the small, fire-wielding apes. And finally, we have the third factor, direct hunting pressure. The first humans were not just passive observers, they were highly intelligent, cooperative hunters. And they had found themselves in a land of naive prey. The megafauna of Australia had evolved for millions of years without a predator like Homo sapiens. They were not afraid of small, upright apes. They did not have the innate fear that the megafauna of Africa, who had co-evolved with our ancestors for eons, possessed. A human hunter could likely walk much closer to a diprotodon or a giant kangaroo than would have been safe in Africa. This made them vulnerable. Even a low level of hunting could have had a massive impact. The megafauna were what we call K-selected species. They lived long lives, had long gestation periods, and produced very few offspring. A diprotodon might only have one baby every few years. This meant their populations could not recover quickly from losses. If human hunters consistently killed even a small number of breeding adults or stole a significant number of eggs and young, it would have been enough over centuries to tip the population into a terminal decline. It was death by 1,000 cuts. So the Great Dying was likely not a single event, but a perfect storm, a synergistic catastrophe. The climate was weakening the giants, shrinking their habitats and food sources. The humans were changing the landscape with fire, further reducing their preferred foods. And at the same time, they were actively hunting them, putting direct pressure on their already stressed populations. It was a slow, inexorable process. Generation by generation, the giants became scarcer. The herds of diprotodon thinned. The flocks of Geniornis shrank. The terrifying roar of the marsupial lion was heard less and less often until one day it was not heard at all. By about 30 KY, a new silence had fallen upon the land. The age of monsters was over. The continent had been tamed, its most spectacular and terrifying inhabitants erased forever. And all that was left were their bones and perhaps a faint, lingering echo in the stories of the people who had watched them die.
Did humans kill the monsters? The giants are dead. The cause of their demise is the greatest cold case in Australian prehistory. We have identified the suspects, a changing climate, and the arrival of a new, cunning primate, but the debate still rages in the halls of science. Who, or what, delivered the final fatal blow? Was it an act of God, or was it a murder? Let us sit as a jury and hear the arguments, presented slowly, calmly, as if in a dream. First, the case for the prosecution, arguing that humans were the primary cause. This is often called the overkill hypothesis, or more gently, the human impact model.
The lead prosecutor points to the timing. The megafauna had survived countless climate cycles before. For millions of years, they had weathered ice ages and warm periods, droughts and floods. They were resilient. But then a new element is introduced into the ecosystem: humans. And within 15 to 20,000 years of their arrival, a blink of an eye in geological time, the majority of the megafauna are gone. The correlation is too strong to be a coincidence. The arrival of the suspect and the time of the death match up perfectly. The prosecutor then presents the weapon. Humans did not have overwhelming strength, but they had three revolutionary tools. First, the spear, a simple pointed stick, perhaps tipped with stone, but when thrown with accuracy and force, it could inflict a grievous wound, especially on an animal that had no evolutionary experience with projectile weapons. Second, and more importantly, was cooperation. A single human was no match for a diprotodon, but a group of 10, 20, 30 humans working together, communicating, planning, that was a different story. They could set traps, they could drive animals over cliffs or into bogs, they could separate a juvenile from its protective mother. They were a pack-hunting super predator with a level of intelligence the world had never seen before. The third and most powerful weapon was fire. As we've discussed, fire stick farming reshaped the entire continent. The prosecution argues that this was a form of ecological warfare, whether intentional or not. Humans actively destroyed the megafauna's habitat, replacing their preferred food sources with plants that were useful to humans but inedible to the giant browsers. They didn't just kill the animals, they dismantled their world. The evidence presented includes the burned eggshells of Geniornis, proof of direct predation. It includes a few sites with potential cut marks on bones. But for an entire continent of megafauna to be wiped out by hunters, we would expect to find more direct evidence of the slaughter. Its absence is telling. The defense argues that the giants were already on their last legs. Their populations were crashing due to the catastrophic loss of water and habitat. They were starving, weak, and confined to ever-shrinking pockets of viable land. The arrival of humans was simply the final nail in the coffin. We were not the murderers, we were merely the scavengers, picking off the last dying remnants of a world that was already doomed. We didn't cause the extinction, we were just witnesses to it. The defense suggests that the timing is not as perfect as the prosecution claims. Some megafauna may have died out before humans even arrived in their specific region. Others may have held on for longer in wetter refuges. The picture is complex, not a simple case of cause and effect. The argument is that the true killer was a force far more powerful than any band of hunters, the unstoppable, indifferent force of planetary climate change. We are giving ourselves too much credit and too much blame. And so, the jury is left to deliberate. Most scientists believe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It was not one or the other, but a deadly combination. A synergistic effect, a perfect storm of extinction. Imagine it like this. The climate punched the megafauna in the gut, leaving them weak, sick, and struggling to stand. And then humans came along and pushed them over. Neither blow on its own might have been fatal, but together they were unstoppable. This is a more complex and perhaps more satisfying conclusion. It acknowledges the immense power of both natural climate change and the transformative impact of our own species, even in its earliest days. The debate is not just academic. It is a story that has profound resonance for us today. We are again living in a time of rapid climate change, and we are again the primary drivers of a mass extinction event. The story of Australia's lost giants is a cautionary tale, a ghost story whispered to us from 50,000 years ago. It is a reminder that ecosystems are fragile, and that the arrival of a new, powerful force, whether it's a changing climate or a new technology, can have
devastating and unforeseen consequences. The verdict on who killed the giants may never be final. The case remains open, and the silence they left behind is the most powerful evidence of all.
What survived and what didn't? The great dying is over. The dust has settled. The silence that fell upon the land 40,000 years ago has become the new normal. Let us now walk through the modern Australian bush and take a census. Who is left? What survived the great extinction, and why? The answer reveals a fascinating story of adaptation, luck, and the shaping of a continent. The most obvious survivors are the kangaroos and wallabies. But they are not the giants of the past. The 10-foot-tall, striding Procoptodon is gone. The robust, powerful Protemnodon is gone. The survivors were the smaller, more nimble species. The red kangaroos, the gray kangaroos, the agile wallabies. Why did they survive? They were generalists. They were not tied to a specific type of forest or vegetation. They could eat a wide variety of grasses and shrubs. Their hopping locomotion, while seemingly strange, is incredibly energy efficient for covering the vast open distances of a drying continent. They were fast, able to escape human hunters, and they were reproductively weedy. A female kangaroo can have a tiny, undeveloped joey in her pouch, a more developed joey at her feet, and be ready to impregnate again, with the ability to pause the development of an embryo until conditions are right. This allowed their populations to rebound quickly in good times, making them resilient to both climate change and hunting pressure. They were the perfect survivors for a tough, unpredictable world. Look at the trees. A koala is nestled in the fork of a eucalyptus tree. It too is a survivor, but of a different kind. It is a super specialist, eating only the toxic, low-nutrient leaves of the gum tree. Its megafauna relatives, like the giant koala, are gone. The modern koala survived perhaps because its lifestyle was so unappealing. Its meat is said to be unpleasant, tainted by eucalyptus oil. It spends most of its life high in the trees, making it a difficult and low-reward target for hunters. It survived by being a specialist on a food source that no one else wanted. In the undergrowth, a wombat tondles past. The common wombat is a ghost of its giant cousin, the Diprotodon. It survived because its lifestyle is one of conservation and defense. It is a powerful burrower, able to dig extensive tunnel systems that provide protection from predators, from fire, and from the extremes of the climate. It is nocturnal and has a slow metabolism. While the 3-ton Diprotodon was too big to hide, the wombat could retreat into the earth itself. Its famous cube-shaped scat is a quirky relic of an animal that has mastered the art of hunkering down. The reptiles also saw great culling. The giant lizard Megalania is gone. The land crocodile Quincana is gone. The survivors were again the smaller, more adaptable species. The goannas, or monitor lizards that we see today, are the smaller cousins of Megalania. They survived because their smaller size meant they needed less food and could hide more easily. The freshwater and saltwater crocodiles survived because the aquatic lifestyle gave them refuge in the river systems, which, while shrinking, were still the most stable habitats on the continent. And the birds. The demon duck Geniornis is gone. The mighty Dromornis is long gone. The survivors are the emu and the cassowary. The emu, like the kangaroo, is a fast, nomadic generalist, able to cover huge distances in search of food and water. The cassowary, a living dinosaur, survived in the shrinking pockets of rainforest in the north. Its aggressive temperament and formidable claws, a powerful defense against any predator, human or otherwise. So what is the common thread among the survivors? First, they were generally smaller. A smaller body requires less food and water, a crucial advantage in a drying, resource-poor continent. The age of giants was over. The age of efficiency had begun. Second, they were adaptable. They were generalists who could eat a variety of foods and live in a variety of habitats. The specialists, like the leaf-eating Diprotodon or the high-browsing Procoptodon, found their niche habitats disappearing from under them. Third, they were either very good at running away, like the kangaroo and emu, or very good at hiding, like the wombat and koala. The slow, lumbering megafauna, who had relied on their size as their main defense, were easy targets for intelligent, spear-wielding hunters. And fourth, they were often weedy reproducers, able to have many offspring and recover their populations quickly. The slow-breeding giants could not keep up with the new pressures. The modern Australian fauna that we see today is therefore a relict. It is a shadow of what once was. It is the cast of survivors that made it through the filter of a brutal extinction event. When you look at a kangaroo, you are not just seeing a kangaroo. You are seeing the descendant of the one that was fast enough to get away. When you see a wombat, you are seeing the descendant of the one that was smart enough to dig a deeper burrow. The world they left behind is haunted by the ghosts of what was lost. The ecosystem is incomplete. The niches once occupied by giant browsers and formidable predators remain empty. The Australian bush, as beautiful and unique as it is a wounded landscape. It is a post-apocalyptic world, and the kangaroos, koalas, and emus are its hardy, resourceful survivors living in the ruins of a lost age of monsters.
The shadows in modern forests. The monsters are dead. Their bones lie buried under layers of sand and time. Science has given them names, measured their size, and written their obituary. The case, it seems, is closed. But what if it isn't? What if some of them, or the memory of them, refused to die? What if they still linger, not as fossils, but as shadows in the modern forest, as whispers on the wind, as stories told around a campfire? Let us delve into the murky, fascinating world of cryptozoology and folklore. Let us explore the idea that the legends of today might be the last distorted echoes of the prehistoric past. The most famous of these legends is the bunyip. The name itself is a catch-all, with descriptions varying wildly from region to region, but a common thread emerges. The bunyip is a creature of the water. It lives in billabongs, swamps, and riverbeds. It is often described as having a horse-like head, a long neck, and a booming, terrifying voice that echoes through the night. It is said to be a dangerous, malevolent creature that preys on animals and sometimes people who stray too close to the water's edge. For a long time, the bunyip was dismissed as pure myth, but then paleontologists began to uncover the bones of Diprotodon. Look at the skull of a Diprotodon. It is large, with a broad snout and high-set nasal passages, not unlike the skull of a hippopotamus. Imagine a human, 40,000 years ago, discovering one of these skulls in a dry riverbed. What would they make of it? They would not know the animal that it came from. They might reconstruct it in their minds as a strange, water-dwelling monster with a horse-like head. And what of the booming call? Diprotodon, being a giant marsupial, likely had larynx and vocal cords capable of producing deep, resonant sounds. Its call could very well have been a terrifying, booming roar. Could the legend of the bunyip be a cultural memory of the Diprotodon? A story that became detached from the real animal as it went extinct, but lived on as a myth? Its details morphing and changing over thousands of years of retelling? The link is speculative, but it is tantalizing. The memory of a giant semi-aquatic beast with a powerful voice living in the waterways seems too close to the reality of Diprotodon to be a mere coincidence. Now let us consider another shadow, the Queensland tiger, or the Yari. This is a legend of a large, cat-like predator, striped or spotted, with a powerful build and a savage nature. It is said to hunt kangaroos and stalk livestock in the remote parts of eastern Australia. Again, science tells us that there are no native placental cats in Australia, but there was the Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion. It was a powerful cat-like predator, and while fossils don't preserve coat patterns, it is entirely possible that it was striped or spotted for camouflage, just like a modern tiger or leopard. Could the stories of the Queensland tiger be a lingering memory of Thylacoleo? Perhaps a relict population of the creature managed to survive in the densest, most remote forests long after the main population had died out. Perhaps it survived long enough to enter the folklore of the Aboriginal peoples and even to be glimpsed by early European settlers, who would have described it in the only terms they knew, as a type of tiger. Again, there is no physical proof, but the stories persist. Eyewitness accounts, often dismissed, continue to trickle out of the deep woods. Is it just a case of mistaken identity, of feral cats or dogs seen in poor light? Or is it the ghost of a real predator, still haunting the periphery of our world? And what of the giant lizards? Stories of huge goannas, far larger than any known species, are common in the folklore of the outback. Tales of lizards 10, 15, even 20 feet long that are aggressive and fearless. Are these just exaggerations? Or are they echoes of megalania? A 20-foot venomous lizard is not something a culture would easily forget. The terror it inspired would be woven into the very fabric of storytelling, a warning to all future generations. Do not sleep near the rocks. Beware the giant lizard. These stories are like fossils of the mind. They are fragments of a past reality worn smooth and distorted by the long river of time. They are not scientific evidence. You cannot put a story in a museum display case. But they speak to a deep human need to explain the world and to remember its dangers. The first peoples of Australia lived in a world of real monsters for thousands of years. It is almost inconceivable that the memory of these creatures would be completely erased. It is far more likely that they would live on, transformed into the mythical beasts that populate the dreamtime and the folklore of the continent.
You wouldn't last a day. Our journey is coming to an end. We have walked the red earth of a lost world. We have stood in the shadow of giants. We have listened to the whispers of their ghosts. And now we are left with a final, quiet reflection. A simple, sobering thought experiment. Let's imagine for a moment that you, the person listening to this, were to be transported back in time, not as a disembodied observer, but as yourself, plucked from your comfortable 21st century life and dropped, alone, into the Australian Pleistocene 50,000 years ago. You arrive with the clothes on your back and the knowledge in your head. You have no spear, no fire, no water bottle, no map. How long would you last? Let us be honest. You wouldn't last a day. Your first challenge would be water. You, a product of a world of taps and bottled water, would have no idea how to find it. You might see a river on the horizon, but you would not know if it was fresh or saline. You would not know how to dig for it in a dry creek bed. The desperate consuming thirst would begin its work within hours.
Your second challenge would be the sun. Your soft indoor skin would begin to burn within minutes under the fierce, unfiltered ultraviolet light. Without shelter, heat stroke would be a very real and rapid possibility. You would seek the shade of a tree, but as we have learned, that is no guarantee of safety. You might be choosing to rest directly under the perch of a waiting thylacoleo. Your third challenge would be food. You're surrounded by plants, but you would not know which are food and which are poison. You might see a kangaroo, but you have no means to hunt it. Your stomach would begin to ache with a hunger you have never known. But these are the slow killers. The real test would come from the creatures themselves. You are a creature of the modern world. Your senses are dull. You're accustomed to the noise of traffic, not to the snap of a twig. Your eyes are trained to look at screens, not to scan a distant tree line for the silhouette of a predator. You would be, in essence, deaf and blind to the dangers around you. You would not recognize the tracks of a megalania in the dust. You would not interpret the sudden silence of the birds as a warning. You would not understand the meaning of a deep guttural growl from the undergrowth. You would be walking through a minefield, and you would not even know you were in a war. An encounter with a predator would be swift and final. You have no defense against a charging guineornis. You cannot outrun a pursuing quincana. You would not even hear the thylacoleo as it dropped from the tree above. Your story would end abruptly, a brief and confusing struggle, before you became just another meal in the great, brutal food chain of the Pleistocene. The first humans who survived here were not like you. They were born into this world. Their minds and bodies were forged by it. They possessed a suite of skills and a depth of knowledge that we have long since lost. They could read the land like a book. They could make tools from stone. They could create fire at will. They could communicate with their clan, working as a seamless, cooperative unit. Their senses were honed to a razor's edge. They were in their own way as perfectly adapted to this environment as the megalania or the diprotodon. They were the world's most dangerous predator, not because of their strength, but because of their minds. And still their lives were a constant struggle. They lived with a level of fear and hardship that we can barely imagine. Every sunrise was a victory. Our journey through prehistoric Australia is not just a tour of a lost world of monsters. It is a lesson in humility. It is a reminder of how profoundly our species has insulated itself from the natural world. We have built walls of concrete and technology to keep the monsters out, to the point where we have forgotten they even existed. But the world we have explored is the real world, the world as it was for millions of years, a world of constant struggle, of predator and prey, of survival on a knife's edge. Our modern world is the anomaly, a brief, fragile bubble of safety and comfort. So as you drift off to sleep, let the sounds of your safe modern world be a comfort. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a passing car. These are the sounds of a world where the monsters are confined to our imaginations and our history books. But remember the world that was, the terrifying, beautiful, and awe-inspiring world of prehistoric Australia. A world of venomous dragons, bone-crushing lions, and 10-foot-tall killer birds. A world of profound silence and sudden, terrifying violence. A world that serves as a powerful, humbling reminder of how small we are and how very, very lucky we are to be living on this side of the great dying. You wouldn't have lasted a day, And in that thought, there is a strange and deep sense of peace. The nightmare is over. You can rest.